Chapter 316. He closed his eyes, but that ugly face was still in front of him. Her head, face, and body were covered in dirt, and there was a smear of purple blood on the corner of her mouth. She was dirty and ugly, making people not want to look at her. But even if he closed his eyes, he would not be able to forget that face. What happened? What happened to him? Chu Xiaoyang suddenly gave a cold shiver. The blood that was about to explode instantly cooled down. The face in front of him was as beautiful as a flower, but it could not arouse any of his passion. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Chen Baiyun waited for a long time, but she did not receive the warm kiss she had imagined. She couldn't help opening her eyes in disappointment and looking at him in confusion. "It's nothing." Chu Xiaoyang's face was calm, not showing any strange emotions. He hugged her shoulder and said, "The doctor said that this king's poison has just been cured, so I can't be too emotional, otherwise the poison will not be cured. We have a long time ahead of us, so there is no need to rush." Chen Baiyun was filled with regret. "Your Highness, it's all Yun'er's fault. You should rest well and Yun'er will give you a massage, all right?" Chu Xiaoyang closed his eyes. Her slender hand gently rubbed his forehead. Her strength was not too strong or too weak, but it was very comfortable. He unknowingly fell asleep. Chen Baiyun looked at his handsome face, and the more she looked at it, the more she liked it. She couldn't help slowly getting closer and secretly kissing his lips. Chu Xiaoyang suddenly turned over, scaring her. Thinking of her previous actions, her face instantly turned red. When Chen Baiyun fell asleep, Chu Xiaoyang quietly got up and left the intoxicated flower pavilion under the cover of the night. He unknowingly walked to the little mirror lake. This place was very close to the flowing cloud pavilion and he would never come here normally, but his mind was in chaos tonight. It seemed like only the lake could calm him down a little. At the little mirror lake, he had kicked her into the water and almost strangled her to death. Luckily she did not die. Even tonight he clearly had the best chance to kill her, but he still let her go. What? Not only was she asking why, even he was asking himself in his heart. Why was he doing this? Actually, the answer was already in his heart, but he was not willing to think about it. He was not willing to admit it, and he did not dare face it. There was only one reason. Chu Xiaoyang suddenly looked away. He didn't dare to think about the secret at the bottom of his heart. It was like a pool of black water that he didn't dare to pry into. There was killing intent. The hairs on the back of his neck suddenly stood up and a cold killing intent suddenly filled his body. Chu Xiaoyang was shocked in his heart. This killing intent came too quickly, and by the time he noticed it, it was already right in front of him. Even with his level of martial arts, he was only discovered when someone approached him. It could be imagined that the opponent's martial arts were at least a notch higher than his. It had to be of his. A black-clothed figure flashed through his mind. That person only used a willow branch to win against his spirit snake sword. His martial arts skills were simply unimaginable. At this critical moment he had no time to think. With a tap of his toes, he flew forward like a white crane gliding across the calm surface of the lake. This Qinggong was called Crane's Shadow on the Cold Pond. It was his family's secret skill and it was unparalleled. Who knew that the person behind him was like a maggot attached to the bone, following him like a shadow and sliding across the lake? Chapter 317. It really is you. Chu Xiaoyang looked at the mysterious black-clothed man who had stopped him in a single move, and his heart was filled with shock and anger. He knew that the other side's martial arts were much higher than his, but he could stop him in a single move. There was only one possibility. That was, he knew his martial arts like the back of his hand. He knew every move and every style of his martial arts clearly. But how was this possible? "I've already said that as long as you bully her again, I won't let you off. Do you think my words are nothing but farts?" Mo Chuan was wearing a human skin mask, so there was no expression on his face at all. There was only a pair of deep eyes that released a cold glow that was filled with an awe-inspiring might. The hand that was holding Chu Xiaoyang's throat slowly increased in strength and tightened. Chu Xiaoyang's throat was filled with pain and he couldn't breathe. He raised his right palm and was prepared to send it out, but his chest suddenly turned numb. Mo Chuan had already sealed his acupuncture point and his body turned stiff, unable to move at all. "What kind of thing are you? What right do you have to meddle in this king's family matters? This king is telling you she is this king's woman, not yours. If this king wants her to live, she will live. If this king wants her to die, she will die. It has nothing to do with you." Chu Xiaoyang's face turned purple and his throat was filled with pain. He knew that as long as the other side used a bit more strength, his throat would shatter and he would die. But there was only anger in his heart, there was no fear at all. His eyes popped out and he had a terrifying and fierce expression as he viciously stared at Emo Chuan. These words seemed to come out of his throat, each word filled with anger and hatred. "You're about to die and you still don't know how to repent," Emo Chuan shouted in a sharp voice. Chu Xiaoyang's stubbornness had exceeded his expectations. Chu Xiaoyang revealed a fiendish smile and said, "Why should this king repent? What kind of person are you? What qualifications do you have to teach this king a lesson? Even if you are the emperor, you don't have the qualifications to meddle in this king's family matters." Although he hated Emo Chuan for standing up for Qin Ning, the unspeakable hatred in his heart had already faded. This was because just now, he had clearly seen the red virginity mark on Qin Ning's arm. This meant that she was still a virgin and had not done anything improper with this man. She could keep her chastity for him, she was worthy of being Chu Xiaoyang's woman. It was a pity that Emo Chuan could not see what he was thinking, otherwise he would have slapped his narcissistic face a few times already. "Yo, very good. Since it's like this, you can reap what you sow." Emo Chuan's eyes turned cold as he spoke in an icy voice. He loosened his grip on Chu Xiaoyang. Chu Xiaoyang felt his throat loosen as he took in large gulps of air. But before he could even take a few breaths, he suddenly felt his collar tighten. Emo Chuan had already picked him up like a rabbit. "What do you want to do?" When Chu Xiaoyang's angry voice came out, he was already flying through the air. With a putong sound, he was thrown into the lake by Emo Chuan like a stone. Qin was he of him. A fresh air entered his lungs, giving him an indescribable sense of comfort. He greedily breathed in. Chapter 318. Facing death once again, Chu Xiaoyang felt like his lungs were about to explode. He cursed Emo Chuan's 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. He could not understand where this bastard had come from. He knew that the other side did not want his life, but rather wanted to torture him, letting him have a taste of Qin Ning's torture. Damn. His head was pulled out of the water once again. He lay on the bank like a dying fish, his belly bulging, his eyes showing the whites of his eyes. Emo Chuan released his acupuncture point and he immediately turned around, spitting out large mouthfuls of lake water. "Do you give up?" When Chu Xiaoyang was about done vomiting, Emo Chuan sealed his acupuncture point. He grabbed his wet hair and looked down at him. "Who the hell are you? Why do you have to stand up for her? This king is telling you you can kill this king. Otherwise, the torture you've given this king today, this king will return it back to you one day." Chu Xiaoyang's eyes were filled with rage as he fiercely shouted. "Very good, come at me if you have the skills. You're bullying a weak girl without any arms, what kind of hero are you? Chu Xiaoyang, are you a man?" Emo Chuan was rarely angry, but his chest felt like it was about to explode today. The inexplicable rage made him want to kill the man in front of him. Whether this king is a man or not, only this king's woman knows. Chu Xiaoyang revealed a fierce smile. "Do you like that ugly monster? It's a pity that she is my Chu Xiaoyang's woman. As long as this king doesn't let her go, she can never leave this place. I don't mind telling you, this king hasn't touched her yet, but if you dare provoke me again, I will let you personally see how she begs for mercy under this king's body. As long as this king is alive, she will forever be my Chu Xiaoyang's woman. If you want her, you'll have to kill me." His body was dripping with water and he was in a sorry state, but the vicious words that came out of his mouth made people tremble in fear. "Chu Xiaoyang." Emo Chuan raised his right palm. He knew that Chu Xiaoyang would do what he said. If he continued to torture him, this fellow would do anything. Unless he killed him. He gritted his teeth and his right palm slowly pressed down on Chu Xiaoyang's head. Chu Xiaoyang felt like there was a 1,000-pound stone on top of his head. It was so heavy that he couldn't bear it at all. His neck bones began to crack from the pressure as if they were going to break. But he forcefully opened his eyes and stared at Emo Chuan. "Kill him, kill this king and that woman will be yours." The muscles on his face contorted, making him look like a completely different person from his usual handsome self. Emo Chuan stared at the strange face in front of him. He could only see a wild rage on this face without any fear of death at all. His heart skipped a beat. "You're not afraid of death?" Emo Chuan's palm stopped 3 inches from Chu Xiaoyang's head. "Emo Xiao Xiao Emo. Emo Emo." Emo Chuan stared into his eyes and his eyes gradually became clear. "Chu Xiaoyang, you really are a blind idiot and fool." He coldly mocked. "You dare to do it but you don't dare to admit it. You don't even have the courage to admit it." Chu Xiaoyang angrily roared, "Who do you think you are? Do you think you're qualified to teach this king a lesson?" Emo Chuan slowly withdrew his palm and looked at him with a look of pity in his eyes. Chapter 319. Chu Xiaoyang gritted his teeth and said in a hoarse voice, "What kind of bullshit treasure is she? This king doesn't care about her at all. But this king's things, even if I don't want them, I won't allow anyone else to touch them." Mo Chuan's face turned livid under his mask. He raised his hand and wanted to slap this fellow to death several times, but he couldn't do it in the end. Chu Xiaoyang coldly said, "If you want to kill me, then hurry up and do it, stop wasting time." "Chu Xiaoyang, you're simply hopeless." Mo Chuan gritted his teeth and took back his hand, turning to leave. "Stop." Chu Xiaoyang coldly shouted from behind him, "Leave her. Scram far away for this king and never appear in front of her again. This king won't touch her." Mo Chuan suddenly turned around and moved as fast as lightning, grabbing Chu Xiaoyang's collar. "You dare touch her?" Chu Xiaoyang looked up with a fiendish smile. "Why wouldn't this king dare? You like that woman, don't you? Are you afraid that this king will bully her? All right, as long as you leave her, this king will promise you that I won't touch a single finger of hers." "Chu Xiaoyang, you're shameless." Mo Chuan's blood rushed to his head. He raised his hand and angrily slapped him twice, making his handsome face turn red and purple. "Very good, this king will remember these slaps. If you don't kill me, this king will let her have a taste of these slaps." Chu Xiaoyang's lips were bleeding and swollen, but the words he said were more vicious than the last. His mouth was filled with ruthless words, but his heart was secretly guessing who this man was. The other side had a mysterious background and strong martial arts, as well as knowing his martial arts like the back of his hand. He had 100 chances to kill him, but he did not do it in the end. Especially the words he said, they were all to teach him a lesson and not to take his life. Just who was he? He could not guess Mo Chuan's identity, but he was sure of one thing. Since the other side did not have any killing intent towards him, he had nothing to fear. Especially since he had the other side's weakness, that ugly woman was the black-clothed man's greatest weakness. Mo Chuan's eyes revealed a look of disgust and hatred. His raised hand stopped in the air, but it did not fall on his face. "All right, as long as you swear that you won't touch a single finger of hers, I'll leave," he said word for word. Chu Xiaoyang smiled. He knew that he had won. He swore word for word, "I, Chu Xiaoyang, will keep my word. As long as she obediently becomes this king's princess, this king will not touch a single finger of hers." If he wanted to torture that woman, why would he need to use force? If of a method to have torture that of a woman of his? Chu Xiaoyang disdained to make a move against women. If it wasn't for him going crazy with anger, he would not have done something as crazy as tonight. "If she suffers even the slightest bit of harm, I will definitely take your head." Before Mo Chuan's voice fell, he had already disappeared, merging into the darkness. Only his voice lingered in Chu Xiaoyang's ears. A small stone flew into him and of sound. Of. Chu of. Chu Xiaoyang felt his chest heat up and his acupuncture point was unsealed. He fell to the ground and his body was covered in sweat. The ruthlessness from before had completely disappeared and his face was filled with disappointment and dejection. Chapter 320. The thick calloused fingers slowly touched her skin, stopping at her delicate neck. Tighten. Harder. She couldn't breathe. She desperately struggled, but she couldn't break free. "Let me go. Let me go." She wanted to shout out, but her throat was blocked and she couldn't shout at all. The hands were using more and more strength. Her chest was filled with pain, but she couldn't take in a single breath. She struggled to open her eyes, but she suddenly found a pair of fierce eyes right in front of her. Chu Xiaoyang. He was here again. He wanted to kill her. His body was pressing down on her and her chest felt like it was being pressed down by a large stone. Her throat was in so much pain that it felt like it was about to be torn apart. Chu Xiaoyang beast scram. She used all the strength in her body and sent a heavy slap at his face. Pa. It was a clear and loud sound. Chu Xiaoyang was stunned by the slap. Scram. Qin Ning angrily shouted as she suddenly woke up from her nightmare. Her body was covered in a cold sweat. Thinking back to the dream from before, it was as real as if it had just happened. She took 2 deep breaths and found that her right hand was aching, like she had really slapped something. Xiao. Hey, why? Why is it you? Why are you here? Qin Ning was shocked. Her eyes opened wide in disbelief as she stared at Mo Chuan sitting in front of the bed. He was staring at her without blinking. His dark eyes flashed with a light that she could not understand. On his elegant face there were 5 clear red handprints. Your face, was it slapped by someone? Qin Ning suspected that she was still dreaming. With Mo Chuan's martial arts, How could he be slapped by someone? Mo Chuan looked at her and his handsome brows slightly jumped up. He softly said, "That's right, I was slapped by someone. I was slapped by a girl who was not only talking in her sleep, she was also slapped in her sleep." Qinning's face turned red. She suddenly realized that she wasn't dreaming. She had really slapped someone's face and this unlucky man was Mo Chuan. "I'm sorry, I really didn't do it on purpose. I just had a nightmare. I dreamed of a beast." She gritted her teeth. That damn Chu Xiaoyang. Not only did he want to kill her while she was bathing, he didn't even let her go in her dream. Nightmare? Mo Chuan's expression became even more difficult to understand. Even if she could read everyone's mind, she couldn't understand the man in front of her. He was simply the nemesis of micro-expressions. It was a nightmare. Qining nodded. Thinking of that terrifying dream, she still felt a lingering fear. But it was a good thing that she wouldn't have this nightmare again. Once she separated from Chu Xiaoyang, she would go back to the bridge with him and return to the road, never to see him again. "Are you afraid? That beast?" he suddenly asked, his eyes revealing a trace of concern and a faint trace of worry. He knew what kind of beast she was dreaming of. He had seen the expression she had when she was in her nightmare. He wanted to comfort her, but she slapped him hard in the face. Speaking of this was the first time he had been slapped by a girl in his life. "Of course I'm not afraid." Qining raised her brows. "I gave him a fierce slap in my dream." She stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. "I never thought that I would slap your face. Xiaohei, are you angry? Does it hurt?" Chapter 321. It doesn't hurt. Mo Chuan revealed a smile as he looked at her with a faint glow in his eyes. "Even if I'm angry with the world, I will never be angry with you." His voice was low and mellow, just like an intoxicating wine. She didn't even need to drink to be slightly drunk. Qinning's face couldn't help turning a little red. She avoided his burning gaze and said in a soft voice, "I never thought that an assassin who kills without blinking would also know how to say such sweet words." Her cheeks were white and had a faint blush on her face. Her hair was like dark clouds that covered her shoulders and back, making her look especially petite and delicate. Her long and dense eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings, covering her misty eyes. Mo Chuan felt like his heart couldn't help beating fast. He stretched out his arm and his fingers touched the silky black hair on her shoulder. His heart filled with an impulse. He wanted to tightly hold her in his embrace. But no. He didn't have the qualifications to touch her. Her current identity was the Dingyuan princess. She was that bastard Chu Xiaoyang's woman. If he touched her, that bastard would not let her go. Mo Chuan calmed himself and slowly took back his hand. His eyes were still on her blushing face. He had come to say goodbye to her. But he didn't know how to say it. Leave without saying goodbye? He couldn't do it. Qining suddenly looked up and the blush on her face disappeared. Her cheeks puffed up as she stared at him. "What, does she look like she's angry?" "You. Where did you go last night?" "You. Do you know what that bastard did? He charged into my room and almost drowned me." "Where were you at that time?" "My personal guard." She questioned him. She thought of the feeling of dying and how her chest felt like it was going to explode. She felt angry and wronged. Didn't he say he would protect her from any harm? Didn't he say he wouldn't let her lose a single hair? But when she needed him the most, he wasn't here. He wasn't here. If it wasn't for Chu Xiaoyang letting her go, he wouldn't have been able to see her again. She bit her lips hard and forced back the tears that welled up in her eyes. She didn't want to cry in front of him. All of the men here, not a single one of them could be relied on. Xiao Bai was like this, vowing that he would come back before the big hunt, but he didn't even show his shadow. This Mo Chuan was still like this. His words were even better than his singing, but she actually believed them. In that moment of despair, on the verge of death, she had hoped for him. She had really hoped that he would come to save her. But he didn't. He didn't appear from the beginning. She was really angry. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her chest was heaving up and down like an angry little beast. She was angry at Mo Chuan, angry at Chu, angry at Mo Chuan, angry at Mo, angry at. She was used to relying on herself and not placing any expectations on anyone, but she had unknowingly looked forward to Mo Chuan and relied on Mo Chuan. But in the end, she realized how laughable her expectations and reliance were. No, said. She was delusional. She wanted too much. After thinking it through, she suddenly wasn't angry anymore. I should have understood earlier that the only one I can rely on is myself. So, Mo Chuan, you can leave. I don't need you anymore. The angry expression on her face disappeared and was replaced with a calm expression. Her voice was also very calm. That's right, she didn't need him anymore. Chapter 322. Emo Chuan was stunned. His handsome face instantly turned pale and his pupils became even darker. She was chasing him away? What? Was it because he didn't appear in time to save her? Could she erase all that she had done for him, all that she had said? His hands tightly clenched into fists as he stared right at her. He was indeed going to leave. But before he could say it, she had already said it. This kind of feeling made his chest feel like it was filled with cotton, making him feel indescribably uncomfortable. Especially her accusation, it was like a whip lashing heavily on his heart. The reason he didn't appear in time was because he suddenly grabbed her hand and used a lot of strength, not caring about her struggles and resistance at all. You're angry? Because I didn't appear last night, right? That's why you want to chase me away, right? He pinched her chin and forced her to look into his eyes. She looked at him with an expressionless face and directly said, yes. Emo Chuan's fingers trembled. His face turned even paler and his eyes turned even darker. Actually, I was here the entire time last night. Emo Chuan's voice was very low, but she could clearly hear each word. He didn't want to explain, but he couldn't stand her cold eyes. That indifference that pushed him 1,000 miles away, as if he was a complete stranger. You were here? Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it was filled with sarcasm. That smile hurt him even more than her words. Very good, you were here. You watched him push my head into the water and you watched him drown me alive. Then you just stood on the side and watched. Very good, Emo Chuan, you. She became angrier the more she spoke and her body began to tremble from anger. If he wasn't here she wouldn't be this angry, but he said he was here. Don't say any more. Emo Chuan suddenly covered her mouth, stopping her from saying anything else. She really didn't say anything else. She even closed her eyes, not willing to look at him again. If she wasn't, she wouldn't be this disappointed, she wouldn't be this angry, and she wouldn't say this kind of harsh words. That was because she cared. I really was here the entire time. She heard Emo Chuan's voice in her ears. It was still as mellow and pleasant as before, but it couldn't make any ripples in her heart. She didn't say anything or move. She continued to close her eyes and not look at him, letting him speak to himself. Emo Chuan looked at her cold and distant little face and gritted his teeth. All right, I'll tell you. The reason why I didn't come to save you was because His face turned from pale to red, and the veins on his forehead bulged. With great difficulty he said, I saw you changing, bathing. I walked away for a while because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to control myself if I continued to watch. I never thought that Chu Xiaoyang would suddenly appear at that time. He didn't want to tell her, but he had been wronged by her, but he had been wronged. He had been wronged when he was because he was Chuan. He would rather tell her the truth, he would rather let her think of him as a lecher. He would rather let her scold him, beat him to her heart's content. Chapter 323. So, it was like this. Chen Ning's face instantly turned red. Her tightly closed eyes opened and she looked at him without blinking. She understood his meaning. He saw that she was bathing, so he moved away. The veins popping out on his forehead and the beads of sweat dripping down his forehead, as well as his embarrassed and ashamed expression, showed that every word he said was true. The deep anger and resentment in her heart towards him suddenly disappeared without a trace. Her eyes were clear and bright, so bright that she could see his shadow, but there was a faint smile on her lips. She wasn't angry? She didn't blame him? Emo Chuan suddenly took a deep breath and the embarrassment and shame on his face disappeared. His expression became calm and composed, and the aura of being in control of everything was oppressive. He tightly held her hand and looked at her. Word by word, it was like he was making a solemn promise. I will take responsibility. Responsibility? What did he mean? Chen Ning was a little confused. She looked over and saw his serious expression and she suddenly understood. So this was what he meant when he said he would take responsibility. This is really interesting. Her face turned slightly red again. Although he did not say it clearly, she knew that he must have seen something he shouldn't have seen last night. Otherwise a man like him would never say the word responsibility. This was the best promise a man could give to a woman. Her heart was beating fast and her face was burning hot. If it was in the modern era, wouldn't these two words represent a proposal? But why did he have to take responsibility for her? Just because he saw her body he had to marry her? What kind of bullshit feudal custom was this? Chen Ning suddenly became angry. That faint shyness and happiness from before disappeared without a trace. Are you willing? She looked up and saw Mo Chuan looking at her in anticipation. He was waiting for her answer. He gathered his courage to admit his mistake and made the only promise he could make in his life. While waiting for her answer, he was so nervous that he held his breath. Seeing her shyly looking down and seeing her face blush, he felt his heart stop beating. She would definitely agree, definitely. No. Chen Ning looked right at him and clearly said, "I'm not willing." What? He was deeply shocked. He gritted his teeth and unknowingly tightened his grip on her hand. What? Good question. I wanted to ask you, why do you have to take responsibility for me? Is it because you saw me bathing? Her eyes sparkled as she looked at him. He was silent. Was this reason not enough? Of course it wasn't because of this reason, but this was the only reason he could give her. Seeing that he didn't say a word, she couldn't help but sneer. She had guessed correctly and anger rose in her heart again. What kind of person do you think Chen Ning is? Would I marry a man just because he saw my body? Then you would be wrong. If I want to marry a man of indomitable spirit. He will love me, spoil me, cherish me, and treat me as the only one in his heart. Leave Chen Ning I will. Chapter 324. Chen Ning was so angry that her body began to tremble. Her teeth tightly bit the blanket as she cursed Mo Chuan half to death in her heart. Damn Xiaohei, take responsibility for whoever you want. It's best if you marry all the women you've seen bathing and take responsibility for them. Let them annoy you to death. There was no movement outside the blanket at all. She knew that Mo Chuan must have left. No one would stay here after being scolded by her, especially a proud man like Mo Chuan. It's good that he left, it's over. She didn't need to return what she owed him and she didn't need to do what he wanted her to do. From now on they would never meet again. What Xiaohei Xiaobai, they could all scram to hell. From now on Chen Ning would not rely on anyone, she would only rely on herself. The blanket was so stuffy that she couldn't even breathe. She threw it off and took in large breaths of air. Suddenly, she was stunned as she stared at the man in front of her in a daze. Mo Chuan did not leave. He stood in front of the bed and his bright eyes looked at her without blinking. That pair of beautiful black eyes had a faint smile on them. She bit her lower lip and angrily punched the bed. Damn Mo Chuan, he was laughing at her. Why aren't you leaving? Could it be that my words aren't clear enough? It is useless for you to stay here. I'll clearly tell you again, I don't need any personal guards. She revealed a serious face and coldly said. Mo Chuan nodded and the smile in his eyes disappeared. He calmly said, I haven't left, I just want something from you. What thing? Something you owe me. He stared at her and slowly pointed at his chin. Chen Ning immediately understood what he wanted. Her face instantly turned red from anger and she fiercely glared at him. Was there a man more shameless than him in this world? He was even more despicable than that bastard Chu Xiaoyang. Alright, isn't it just a kiss? I'll give it back to you now. She angrily threw off the blanket and got off the bed, standing barefoot in front of him. He crossed his arms and raised his chin, looking like he was high above, looking down on everything. He just looked down at her. Lower your head, I can't reach it. She angrily said. If you can't reach it, then step on this. His foot moved and hooked over a stool to the side. Alright. Chen Ning stepped onto the stool without any hesitation and looked down at him from above. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes before kissing him on the forehead. After kissing, she would leave. She didn't want to look at him anymore. Before her lips could touch his forehead, the stool suddenly tilted and she lost her footing. Her body swayed and she fell right into his open arms. His arms slowly tightened, hugging her tightly in his embrace. He promised Chu Xiaoyang that he wouldn't touch her, but she threw herself into his embrace, so it didn't count. You let go of me. She struggled with all her might. Chen Ning's head was pressed against his chest, so naturally she couldn't see the sly look in his eyes. What she smelled was the clear scent that was emitted from his body. It was very pleasant, just like his person. It would make her unknowingly intoxicated. His chest was hard and thick and she could almost hear the sound of his heart, thump thump, thump thump thump. Was it because he was hugging her? Why was he so excited and nervous? Was it because he was hugging her? Had he never hugged another girl before? Chapter 325. But very quickly this sweetness was covered up by anger. This damn Mo Chuan, he had purposely set up this trap to take advantage of her. That chair must have been kicked down by him, he wanted to use this method to hug her. Mo Chuan. What do you mean by this? If you want to hug me, then just hug me. There's no need to play so many tricks. She couldn't break free from his embrace, so she just chose to be innocent and embarrass him. Emo Chuan's face turned a little red. He never thought that she would be this straightforward. His thoughts were exposed by her, and the awkwardness on his face disappeared in a flash. He quickly regained his calm expression. Yes, I want to hug you, he calmly admitted. He dared to say what he did, not like that coward Chu Xiaoyang. What? Could it be that you want to take responsibility after hugging me? I'm telling you, I Chen Ning don't care at all. What kind of bullshit rules are these? Let go of me. She couldn't struggle free. She suddenly lowered her head and bit down on his arm. He did not move at all as he let her bite him, but his heart suddenly came to a realization. So she was angry because of this. The smile on his lips slowly grew. The joy in his heart was like a wave rolling over and over. The muscles on his arm were very strong. Chen Ning gritted her teeth in pain, leaving a deep bite mark on his arm. She bitterly looked up and angrily glared at him. Emo Chuan, if you're a man, then don't use force on me. He suddenly let go of his arm. Chen Ning took several steps back, staying as far away from him as possible. It was like he was a man-eating tiger. Seeing her alert and vigilant eyes, Emo Chuan's eyes sparkled. I'm leaving. He looked up at the sky outside. The sky was slightly bright. If he didn't leave now, he wouldn't be willing to leave. He couldn't stay here. He couldn't give Chu Xiaoyang a reason to hurt her. This was the best way he could protect her. Emo Chuan knew that even if Chu Xiaoyang had 1,000 faults, he still had a strong point, which was that his promises were worth 1,000 gold. Since he swore that he wouldn't touch a single finger of hers, he would definitely keep his word. Chen Ning was stunned, almost not daring to believe her ears. Was there something wrong with this man? He didn't leave when she chased him away and even wanted to take advantage of her. After taking advantage of her, he didn't even say a word and actually said that he wanted to leave? Leave. If you leave, don't ever appear in front of me again. She was filled with rage. Her lips turned white from her biting. She grabbed a pillow and threw it at Emo Chuan. Emo Chuan grabbed the pillow she threw at him as well as her hand. He forcefully gripped it as his dark eyes deeply looked at her. I'm leaving, but I believe we'll meet again soon. I never want to see you again, she said through gritted teeth. Emo, comma, Chin, comma, Chuan, comma, Emo. He turned around and leaped out of the window. The hem of his black robe was like an ink-colored butterfly, swaying in the morning light and disappearing. Chin. He actually left without any reluctance to part with her. Emo, Chin. Keep dreaming. Chen Ning charged in front of the window and threw the pillow in her hand in the direction Emo Chuan disappeared in. She gasped for breath, so angry that she couldn't speak. Emo Chuan Chu Xiao Bai Chu Xiaoyang. None of you men are good things. She fiercely cursed again. Chapter 326. The news of Emo Chuan leaving quickly reached Chu Xiaoyang's ears. Watch the flowing cloud pavilion for this king. No matter what man it is, as long as they take a single step into the flowing cloud pavilion, immediately report to this king. Chu Xiaoyang called over the carefully trained secret guard captain and gave this order. This group of elite secret guards had been ordered to protect the intoxicated flower pavilion and Chen Baiyun's safety. Now that he was filled with anger, he had sent them all to guard the flowing cloud pavilion. He wanted to see what kind of person dared to have ideas about his woman. The secret guard captain received the order, but his heart was secretly feeling strange. Didn't they all say that His Highness' heart was the concubine? How come in the blink of an eye, that unfavored princess had suddenly turned into a phoenix? Chu Xiaoyang stayed in the Peach Blossom Cove alone and did not go to the intoxicated flower pavilion to see Chen Baiyun for several days. He was very upset and did not want to see anyone. Even his personal attendant Xiaoenzi and his confidant housekeeper Su were not allowed to see him. In the past, whenever he was upset, he would stay in the Peach Blossom Cove for a few days to calm himself down, but this time it did not work. The longer he stayed, the more upset he became. He missed Chen Baiyun, but he did not want to go to the intoxicated flower pavilion. Because he wanted to see her, but he did not dare to see her. What was wrong with him? Every time he wanted to see Chen Baiyun, another face would appear in front of him. It was the owner of that face that disturbed his mind and made his temper very bad. There were several times when he wanted to pull out the spirit snake sword and charge into the flowing cloud pavilion to kill that woman. If she died, he would not be so restless. He would be able to love the woman he loved with all his heart and would never feel ashamed to face her again. But when he thought of the mysterious man's threat, he bitterly dispelled that thought. Qining, this king will not kill you. You want to divorce me and you still want to separate from me? In your dreams. This king will slowly torture you until you kneel down and beg for mercy to this king. Chu Xiaoyang's face sank. He spread out a piece of paper without any expression and picked up a brush. The tip of the brush was ethereal, quickly sketching on the paper, and an ink portrait quickly appeared on the paper. Since he could not see the woman he loved, he could at least draw a portrait of her to comfort himself. Chu Xiaoyang stared at the portrait before the ink dried and he could not help being stunned. He was indeed drawing Qin Baiyun, but it was the 7 or 8-year-old Qin Baiyun that saved him from the lake 8 years ago. It was the most profound image in his mind. She was drenched like a drowned rat, her wet hair draped over her face, revealing only a pair of big watery eyes. Tears kept rolling down from her eyes as she pulled his hand and begged him not to die. She had grown into a beautiful woman 8 years later. She had even won the title of the capital's #1 beauty in the capital. He was not an exception. His gaze fell on the little girl on the screen for a long time. For some reason his heart suddenly moved. She had grown up and become more beautiful, but he still felt that something was wrong. Chu Xiaoyang raised his brush again. With a wave of his sleeve he began to paint. He drew very quickly, and the delicate and pretty face of a young girl gradually revealed itself on the paper. Her jet-black hair draped over her shoulders. Her white hand held a peach blossom branch as she turned around and smiled. Chapter 327. Chu Xiaoyang put down his pen and placed his hands on the table. Looking at these two pictures he fell into a daze. In terms of likeness, this girl that he had only met twice looked more like Qin Baiyun when she grew up. So when he first saw the girl on the peach blossom tree, he was shocked and thought that he was hallucinating. The girl from back then had grown up. But who was this girl? It was as if she had descended from the sky and appeared in front of him. Then she was as indiscernible as smoke. Before he could even touch her shadow, she had disappeared again. Moreover, she had disappeared without a trace. He did not receive any news of the girl at all. Xiaoanzi, you're quite bold. Didn't this king say that no one is allowed to disturb this king? Chu Xiaoyang's ears moved. He heard the sound of footsteps coming closer and he immediately scolded him in a cold voice. Xiaoanzi's terrified voice came from outside the door. I ask for your highness forgiveness. It is the concubine consort who has come to the garden and wants to see your highness. This servant cannot stop her, so please tell your highness. Yuner? Chu Xiaoyang's mood was complicated, he was happy and worried. After hesitating for a bit he said, let her in. He glanced at the portrait on the table, took a piece of Xian paper and covered the portrait of the unknown girl. If Yuner saw this she would be jealous and cause trouble. Qin Baiyun was holding a box of food as she slowly walked in. A fragrant wind filled the air as she bowed down to Chu Xiaoyang. Every time she appeared in front of Chu Xiaoyang, she would always dress very well. Today she was wearing a light purple dress that dragged on the ground, adding a bit of an ethereal aura to her. Your Highness, you haven't come to see Yuner in several days. Yuner heard that your Highness has been living here and there is no one to serve you. Yuner is worried about your body, so I specially made a bowl of ginseng soup for your Highness. Yuner did not mean to break the rules, but after your Highness drinks the ginseng soup, Yuner will immediately leave. Qin Baiyun's sense of propriety was just right. It showed her concern for him and also showed that she understood the big picture. When Chu Xiaoyang heard this, he felt very comfortable no matter how he listened. He suddenly felt a sense of guilt in his heart. He thought of how he had not seen her for the past few days because of his worries, but she had missed him like this. He really shouldn't have. Why are you looking down when you see this king? Do you not want to see this king? He pulled Qin Baiyun's hand to help her stand up. Seeing her still looking down, he saw that she still had her head down. He saw that delicate and beautiful face, but there was no makeup on it today. Her face was pale white and there were tears in her eyes. There was a trace of tears on her face. Such a lovely and moving woman could move his heart even more than her usual dainty and beautiful appearance. Why is your face so pale? Are you feeling unwell? Xiaoanzi quickly summoned the imperial physician. He immediately shouted at Xiaoanzi, who was outside the door. Qin Baiyun grabbed his hand and forced a smile as she shook her head. Your Highness, Yuner's body is very good, there is no need to call a doctor. Yuner has missed your Highness too much, so I haven't been able to sleep well for the past few nights. Seeing that your Highness is fine today, Yuner will be able to sleep well when I go back. She gently let go of Chu Xiaoyang's hand and opened the food box. She took out a bowl of hot ginseng soup and placed it in front of Chu Xiaoyang. Chapter 328. Your Highness you. Chen Baiyun's face turned red and she quickly pulled back her hand. The bowl in her hand did not hold and fell to the ground. Seeing that it was about to fall onto the table, Chu Xiaoyang suddenly reached out and the bowl fell into his hand. He smiled as he put the bowl back into the food box. Your Highness, your martial arts are very good. Chen Baiyun's eyes were filled with admiration and love. She looked around and saw the portrait on the table. She pursed her lips into a smile and said, "Yeah, your Highness is truly skilled in both the pen and the sword. Yun-er never knew that your Highness could paint." Chu Xiaoyang held her waist and his eyes filled with pride. With a smile he said, "Yun-er, what do you think of this king's painting?" Chen Baiyun carefully looked over the person on the paper and praised, "Your Highness' brush strokes are divine and the person is very lifelike. It's like they just walked out of the painting." She thought that Chu Xiaoyang would paint her, but she never thought that it would be a little girl with disheveled hair and a face covered in tears. She was instantly disappointed. But she hid it very well and Chu Xiaoyang did not notice it at all. He was in high spirits as he admired his painting with her. He smiled and said, "Yun-er, look at how ugly you looked when you cried. Did you never dream that after 8 years, you would blossom into the most beautiful flower?" Chen Baiyun's heart skipped a beat and jumped into her throat. The blush on her face quickly disappeared. She unknowingly clenched her fists as she stared right at the little girl in the painting. Yun-er. Chu Xiaoyang called her twice before she came back to her senses. She forced a smile at Chu Xiaoyang and said, "Your Highness, why would you suddenly paint Yun-er when she was young? Yun-er back then was really ugly to death. If other people saw this painting wouldn't they laugh at Yun-er? How about you give this painting to Yun-er and let Yun-er take good care of it? This was personally painted by your Highness for Yun-er and Yun-er wants to enjoy it alone, not letting anyone else see it." Chu Xiaoyang said with a smile without any hesitation, "All right, since you like it, then take it." "Many thanks, your Highness. Yun-er will definitely take good care of this painting." Chen Baiyun smiled as she slowly rolled up the painting and placed it to the side. She stroked her hair and coquettishly said, "Your Highness, your paintings are very good. Yun-er wants a painting from your Highness, but I don't know if your Highness is willing or not." "If you don't say it, how do you know if this king is willing or not?" Chu Xiaoyang lovingly rubbed her chin. His face was filled with a smile, making him look even more handsome. He was in a very good mood. The depression and annoyance of the past few days were suddenly swept away, all of it was swallowed into his stomach along with the bowl of ginseng soup. He was in a good mood and all the depression he had was suddenly felt. With such a beautiful woman by his side, he was actually worried about that ugly monster all day long. Wasn't that stupid? "Your Highness, Yun-er wants you to draw a portrait for me, are you willing?" Chen Baiyun revealed a smile. Her brows were like silk and filled with love, making Chu Xiaoyang's heart beat faster. He smiled as he pulled out a piece of paper, but he did not notice the painting underneath it. He looked at the young girl with sparkling eyes and then turned to look at Chen Baiyun. He felt that the two of them were quite similar. He smiled as he pulled out a piece of paper, but he didn't notice the portrait underneath it. He looked at the young girl with sparkling eyes and then turned to look at Chen Baiyun. He felt that the two of them were quite similar. Chapter 329. You recognize her? Chu Xiaoyang's heart skipped a beat as he turned to look at her. Of course Chen Baiyun recognized her. Even if she turned to ashes she would still recognize her. That beautiful smiling girl in the painting, if it wasn't Chen Ning, who else could it be? Countless questions flashed through her mind. Why would His Highness draw Chen Ning's portrait? From his tone, it seemed like he didn't know that the person in the painting was Chen Ning. This girl is so beautiful. Chen Baiyun revealed a stunned expression as she stroked the girl's hair. She clicked her tongue in praise before suddenly angrily saying, "No wonder your Highness hasn't gone to the intoxicated flower pavilion to see Yun-er. It seems like you have another beautiful person in your heart. Yun-er knows that I am ugly, so I won't bother your Highness' eyes." She pretended to be angry and turned to leave, but was pulled back by Chu Xiaoyang. "Silly girl, how could this king have a beautiful person in his heart? This king only loves you the most." Chu Xiaoyang smiled as he scratched her nose and spoiled her. "Then who is the girl in the painting? She is this beautiful and His Highness has personally painted her, isn't she your sweetheart?" Chen Baiyun unhappily pouted her lips. "Of course not. This king doesn't know who she is, I just happened to see her and drew her. Since you've misunderstood this king, then this king will burn it." Chu Xiaoyang did not care as he picked up the painting. Waving the torch he burned it. Compared to the person in front of him, what did the person in the painting count for? Qin Baiyun's anger turned into joy. She leaned into Chu Xiaoyang's embrace and said in a soft voice, "Your Highness, Yun'er is afraid that you have another woman in your heart and you won't like Yun'er anymore. Actually, Yun'er is not jealous of this girl, Yun'er is just. She was so embarrassed that she could not continue. Chu Xiaoyang smiled as he continued for her, "It's just that you like this king too much, isn't that so?" He laughed as he picked up Qin Baiyun and walked to the couch on the side. Qin Baiyun's heart was beating fast as she coquettishly said, "Your Highness, don't. It's daytime right now." Her face was as red as a rose. Chu Xiaoyang placed her on the couch and said with a smile, "Of course this king knows it's daytime, but aren't you thinking too much about it, Yun'er? This prince only wants you to lie down here and properly paint a painting for you. Oh, let's paint a painting with the 4 words crabapple sleeping in spring. What do you think?" His tone was teasing. Qin Baiyun covered her head in embarrassment and angrily said, "Your Highness is teasing me, Yun'er will ignore you." But her heart couldn't help feeling disappointed. She supported her chin with one hand and placed the other on her lap, looking very lazy and charming. Looking at Chu Xiaoyang, who was concentrating on painting, her eyes seemed to be thinking of something. She was only thinking in her heart, why would His Highness give that cheap woman Chen Ning a portrait? How did he get to see that bitch's face? It had to be that cheap woman. She had purposely revealed her true appearance to seduce His Highness and take her most beloved man away from her. No, she had to find a way to destroy her face before His Highness found it. Or the person who destroyed her. She suddenly felt powerless. After Lan Xiang died, there was no one she could trust by her side. In this king's palace, other than herself, she did not trust anyone. That's right. She could not trust the people in the king's palace, but she had her mother. She believed that her mother would be able to help her think of a way to deal with that cheap woman Chen Ning. Last time, her mother had prepared a bag of good things and had arranged a swap on that cheap woman's wedding night, almost sending that cheap woman to meet King Yama. As long as her mother made a move this time, that cheap woman would not be able to escape death. Chapter 330. When Qin Baiyun returned to the intoxicated flower pavilion, she used the excuse that she wasn't feeling well and quickly sent someone to the country protecting palace to invite her mother, Madame Lin. Madame Lin quickly arrived at her intoxicated flower pavilion. The mother and daughter whispered to each other in her room. After sending Madame Lin off, Qin Baiyun revealed a satisfied smile. She turned around and smiled at a 40-year-old woman beside her. "Nanny, do you remember everything my mother said?" This woman's husband was surnamed Qin and was Qin Baiyun's nanny. She was loyal to the mother and daughter pair and had been specially brought by Madame Lin to the king's palace to serve Qin Baiyun. She respectfully replied, "Second miss, this old servant has remembered everything. Please be assured, second miss, this old servant will do her best to serve second miss and will definitely fulfill your wish." "Very good. Now go to the Flowing Cloud Pavilion and tell elder sister that I will invite you to the garden to enjoy the flowers tomorrow and ask elder sister to come." "Yes, second miss." Madame Qin lowered her head in agreement. Under the guidance of a young maid, she headed to the Flowing Cloud Pavilion. Chen Ning had been very satisfied these past few days. Chu Xiaoyang did not show himself, so of course no one came to cause trouble for her. Chu Xiaobai and Mo Chuan also did not appear, so she had a rare moment of peace. She was now calmly waiting for the spring banquet on the 10th day of the 4th month. She would enter the palace to see the emperor and ask for a decree to separate. Today she was sitting on the newly built swing in the yard. She saw Xiao Ru pouting as she walked over with an unhappy face. "You little girl, your mouth could hang oil bottles on it. What is making you unhappy?" she teased with a smile. "No, nothing." Xiao Ru shook her head. "Quickly say it, what is it?" Xiao Ru reluctantly said, "Young miss, it's someone from the intoxicated flower pavilion who wants to see you." This servant had her wait outside. "Young miss, no matter what the matter is, it's like a weasel paying respects to a chicken. It's not good." Qin Baiyun? She hadn't heard any news from her in several days. Sending someone to see her, she must have thought of something new. Chen Ning smiled and pinched Xiao Ru's cheek. With a smile she said, "That's right, but I've been bored these past few days, so I'll play with her. Go invite her in." Xiao Ru was about to leave. "Wait a minute. Who did Qin Baiyun send?" "Eldest miss, it's Miss Qin from our manor. She is second miss wet nurse." Xiao Ru pouted and angrily added, "That Miss Qin has a stomach full of bad intentions. The second miss grew up drinking her milk, but she also has a rotten stomach, not having a good heart." "So it's her." Qin Ning's eyes lit up. After searching through the memories of the original owner, she had a general understanding of Miss Chen's personality. The so-called helping the evildoer and helping the evildoer was referring to people like Miss Chen. But on the surface she was always smiling at the original owner. Hiding a dagger in her smile was the most appropriate way to describe her. There's a road to heaven but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell but you want to throw yourself into it. Ning said to herself. Then she smiled until her eyes narrowed. Very good. Xiaoru, go invite Mother Qin in. You have to be polite and kind, you're not allowed to look at Mother Qin, do you understand? Young miss, you have to be careful of Ning. In the past Xiaoru wanted to say more. Chapter 331. Xiaoru seemed like she suddenly understood something. She clapped her hands and said with a smile, this servant understands. This servant will go invite Mother Qin in. A good girl. Ning nodded in satisfaction. She knew that Miss Chen was very cunning, even more scheming than Qin Baiyun and Lan Xiang combined. For Madame Lin to send her to the king's palace to serve Qin Baiyun, her goal must have been to give her a hard time. But she was not afraid at all. The current Ning was not the same Ning from before. Very quickly Miss Chen followed Xiaoru into the flowing cloud pavilion. Her eyes looked around and when she arrived in front of Ning, she had a respectful appearance. She bowed to Ning but she did not bow down. This old servant Miss Chen greets young miss. She used her old age to speak, still using the old way of addressing her. She had already heard from Madame Lin and Qin Baiyun in the intoxicated flower pavilion about Ning's actions in the king's palace, but she did not believe it at all. Thinking back to when they were in the country protecting palace, this young miss was a complete idiot who was played in the palm of their hands. How could she become so strong after marrying into the king's palace? So it must be because the second miss and Lan Xiang were useless. She had personally come to the flowing cloud pavilion this time to send a message. Her goal was to see Ning's situation. Ning was sitting on the swing, smiling as she talked to Xiaohe beside her. She did not even look at Miss Chen as if she did not exist. This old servant Miss Chen greets young miss. Miss Chen's legs were sore from squatting. Seeing that Ning was ignoring her, her heart was filled with anger and her voice doubled in volume. Ning heard it this time. Her eyes turned and fell onto Miss Chen. Someone slapped the servant's mouth. Yes, princess consort. Xiaohe immediately came forward and pulled back Miss Chen's hair, revealing her half-old and half-aged face. Xiaoru did not say anything and slapped her twice with a pa-pa sound. She thought back to when she was in the country protecting palace and how Miss Chen had helped the Madame Lin mother and daughter bully the young miss. She was filled with anger so these two slaps were especially hard. Miss Chen was stunned by the slaps. She blinked for a while before she could react. She had been slapped in the face. Young miss, this old servant. Before she could finish, Ning coldly said, continue slapping her. Xiaoru bluntly slapped her again. Xiaoru bluntly slapped her face again. Miss Chen never would have dreamed that she would be slapped 4 times as soon as she entered the flowing cloud pavilion. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. This old servant doesn't accept this, young miss, you? She remembered that the one His Highness doted on the most was the second miss who grew up drinking her milk and not the young miss in front of her, so her heart was filled with confidence. Continue to beat him. Beat him until he understands the rules. Ning slowly took the cup of hot tea that Chun Tao handed over and looked at Miss Chen from the corner of her eyes. Xiaoru slapped Miss Chen several times until the corner of her mouth began to bleed. Her eyes couldn't help revealing a look of hatred. She suddenly had an idea and quickly changed the way she addressed her. With a putong sound she kneeled on the ground and said, Princess consort, this old servant knows her mistake. I ask for the princess consort's forgiveness. Chapter 332. When Xiaoru and the other maids heard this, they couldn't hold back their laughter. It was hard for them to hold it in. Miss Chen's face turned purple with anger, but she couldn't do anything to Ning pretending to be a fool. She could only swallow this grievance in silence. She forced out a smile and said, it was this old servant who was blind when I entered the palace and accidentally bumped into a pillar. Many thanks for the princess consort's concern. So you bumped into a pillar. Mother Chen's eyesight is too bad. Today your luck was good and you bumped into a pillar. If your luck was bad tomorrow you might have bumped into a ghost, he. Ning pursed her lips as she giggled. Miss Chen was filled with rage, but she didn't dare say anything. She could only lower her head and say, the princess consort is joking. But she fiercely said in her heart, this old lady bumped into a ghost like you. I'll turn you into a ghost tomorrow. What did Mother Qin come to find this princess for? Qin Ning lazily looked at Miss Qin. Reporting to the princess consort, this old servant has come under the orders of the second miss to invite the princess consort to the lake tomorrow. The second miss said that she hasn't seen the princess consort in a long time and misses you. Recently there have been flowers blooming on the lake, so she wants to have a drink with the princess consort on the flower boat and reminisce about sisterhood. Miss Qin endured the pain on her cheeks as she spoke with a grimace. Oh, little sister wants to invite this princess to the lake to see the flowers? It's rare for little sister to have this kind of interest, so as an elder sister, I can't disappoint little sister's good intentions. Mother Qin, go back and tell little sister that this princess has agreed and will even bring wine and dishes for little sister to taste. Qin Ning smiled as she waved her hand. She ordered Xiao Ru, go take out 10 coins and give it to Mother Qin. Let her take it to see her eyes. If she really bumps into a ghost, then little sister will lose a loyal servant. Miss Qin's face turned red and her heart turned cold. How could the young Miss words be so sharp? It was like she was a completely different person from before. She slightly raised her head and peeked at Qin Ning from the corner of her eyes. She saw Qin Ning's dark and bright eyes looking at her with a smile. She was shocked and quickly lowered her head. Mother Qin, we are all people of the Hugua Palace, we don't need to follow the king's palace's rules. If you want to see this princess then just openly look. It's been a while, don't you want to see this princess face? You can be assured and look up. Miss Qin had already eaten a few mouthfuls because of this title, how could she dare act rashly again? Hearing Qin Ning's words, she gathered her courage to look at Qin Ning and gave a flattering smile. The princess consort's complexion is becoming better, your highness must love the princess consort a lot. This old servant is happy for the princess consort's phoenix body. She flattered her with insincere words, but in her heart she thought, why is this Tish's face so clean? It's as fresh as a freshly peeled egg? If His Highness saw this face his it and Qin say I heat. No wonder the second miss wanted to ruin the young miss face. If she kept this face it would only be a disaster. And Mother Qin's mouth is really sweet. This princess likes to hear these words. Xiao Ru, give Mother Qin another 5 coins to buy candy. This will make her mouth even sweeter and make little sister happy. Miss Qin had an awkward expression. She could not tell which of Qin Ning's words was true and which was false. She walked out of the flowing cloud pavilion and stared at the 15 copper coins that Qin Ning had given her. She was clearly sending away a beggar. Chapter 333. Nanny Yu. Your face. When Qin Baiyun saw Miss Qin she was shocked. She quickly understood and tightly clenched her fists. Was she hit by that cheap woman? She really is bold, actually daring to hit this concubine's people. She slapped your face, it's clear that she doesn't place this concubine in her eyes. Nanny, just wait, this concubine will report to His Highness and let him take care of this matter for you. She was filled with rage. Thinking of Chu Xiaoyang's affection for her, her heart was filled with confidence as she walked away. Miss Qin pulled her back. Second miss, don't be impatient. This old servant taking a few slaps doesn't mean anything, we can't disturb His Highness with this matter. We should take our time to think about tomorrow's matter. Miss Qin said in a pained voice. You're saying that cheap woman agreed to go to the lake tomorrow? Qin Baiyun's eyes flashed with a look of joy and ruthlessness. Yes, she agreed very quickly. But from this old servant's observation, the young miss seems to be different from before. It's like she's a different person. Miss Qin thought back to the Qin Ning she saw in the flowing cloud pavilion. She was always smiling, but she did not show any mercy when dealing with her and her words were watertight. How was this still the Hugua manners idiot Qin Ning who could be bullied by anyone? However, even if she's as evil as a ghost, I'll still make her drink this old servant's foot-washing water tomorrow. Miss Qin revealed a sinister smile. Nanny, have you thought of a good way to deal with her? Qin Baiyun was pleasantly surprised. She knew that the nanny her mother sent for her would not disappoint her. Second miss, you don't need to worry, let this old servant make a good plan. This young miss is not easy to deal with, I'm afraid the plan we came up with will be easily seen through by her. Miss Qin thought of Qin Ning's faint smile and her heart was a bit confused. Qin Baiyun became anxious hearing this. Are we just going to let her go like this? Nanny, you don't know, but His Highness seems to be paying more and more attention to that cheap woman. If His Highness sees her face. She suddenly gave a cold shiver. Her eyes fell onto the portrait on the table from Chu Xiaoyang and she grabbed Miss Qin's hand. Nanny, you have to think of a way. No matter what, you can't let His Highness see her face. Second miss, relax. Since the young miss wants to use her face to seduce His Highness, then we'll destroy her little face first. Miss Chin viciously said. Don't worry. She lowered her head and saw the portrait. She exclaimed in surprise, Isn't this what eldest miss looked like when she was young? Second miss, did you draw this? Of course not. I took this back from His Highness. I never thought that after 8 years, His Highness would still clearly remember this cheap woman's appearance. If he sees that bitch in the portrait, he'll know that the person who saved him back then wasn't me but that bitch. He'll definitely know. The more she thought about it, the more afraid she became. Her body couldn't help but tremble. Although Chu Xiaoyang had burned the picture of the grown-up Chen Ning, if he saw Chen Ning in person he would be able to guess the truth. Miss Chen didn't care about the difference between master and servant. She hugged Chen Baiyun and gently comforted her. Chen Baiyun had grown up drinking her milk, so she was no different from her own child. They were master and servant, but in her heart Chen Baiyun was already her own pearl. Even if she had to give up her life for Chen Baiyun, she would not hesitate. Chapter 334. No, she's not dead, that cheap woman is still alive. As long as she's alive, she will tell His Highness about this matter one day. Nanny, I'm scared, I'm really scared. Chen Baiyun tightly buried her head in Miss Chen's chest as she cried like a pear blossom in the rain. Nanny, I'm really scared. I'm really scared that after His Highness finds out the truth, he won't love me anymore. After all these years he has never forgotten that cheap woman. He thinks that person is me, it's me. That's why he loves me so much and loves me so much. I'm really scared. Every time he looks at me, I can't help thinking that the person he's looking at is not me, but rather that cheap woman. Nanny, tell me, is the person His Highness loves me? Or is it that cheap woman? She buried herself in Miss Chen's embrace and spoke while crying like a child. The fear that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time was like a flood that instantly destroyed her usual disguise. Especially in front of the person she trusted the most, she did not need to hide her fear anymore. Second miss, of course the person His Highness loves is you. It can only be you, it will never be that cheap woman. As long as that cheap woman closes her mouth, no one will ever know about what happened in the past. It's already been 8 years, not to mention that second miss is similar to that cheap woman. As long as that cheap woman dies, His Highness will never know about this secret and the position of the Ding Yuan princess will belong to second miss sooner or later. Miss Chin patted Chen Baiyun's back in comfort as a fierce glow flashed in her eyes. Even if she had to risk her life, she would take care of this thorn in Chen Baiyun's side for Chen Baiyun. She suddenly thought of a good idea and couldn't help revealing a dark smile. Second miss, this old servant has thought of something. We'll use both methods tomorrow and let that cheap woman escape the first one, but she won't be able to escape the second one. Chen Baiyun instantly stopped crying. She looked up from Miss Chen's embrace and looked at her with a surprised and happy expression. Nanny, what method did you think of? Although there were only the two of them in the room and the other servants had been sent far away by Chen Baiyun, in order to be careful, Miss Chen moved her lips to Chen Baiyun's ears and whispered a few words that only Chen Baiyun could hear. After Chen Baiyun heard this, she slightly knit her brows. Although this method is good, what if it hurts the child in my stomach? She placed her hand on her stomach and hesitated. This was her magic weapon, as well as her stepping stone to the Ding Yuan princess throne. No matter what, nothing could happen to the child. Miss Chin said, Second miss, you can be assured this old servant will be careful. I will not let the second miss suffer any injuries and I will not harm the little successor in your stomach. Alright, we'll do as you say. Chen Baiyun finally relaxed as she rubbed her stomach with a smile. Miss Chen calling her little successor, made her heart burst with joy. As long as she followed this nanny's method, she would quickly take care of this thorn in her side, Chen Baiyun. At that time, she would become the princess consort and her child would be His Highness' successor. He would be filled with glory and endless wealth. Then this old servant will go prepare first. After tomorrow there will no longer be a young miss in this world. Miss Chen smiled lovingly at Chen Baiyun. When she mentioned Chen Baiyun, her eyes flashed with a sharp glow. You have to be careful, you can't let His Highness find out. Chen Baiyun looked at Miss Chen and bit her lips. This old servant understands. If I'm found out, this old servant will not drag the second miss down. Miss Chen decisively said. Chapter 335. The sky was clear and the wind was gentle. Chen Ning's mood was as good as the weather. She sat in front of the dressing table and Xiao Ru was helping her comb her hair while looking at the smiling Chen Ning in the mirror. Her heart was filled with 100 questions. Young miss, are you really going to go sightseeing with the second miss? That's right. Don't you think today is a good day to go sightseeing? Qin Ning looked around in the mirror and nodded in satisfaction. Xiao Ru, your hair combing skills are getting better and better. But young miss, the second miss must have bad intentions. Xiao Ru couldn't help saying. If she could see it, then the young miss must have seen it too. What she couldn't understand was why the young miss knew that the second miss did not have good intentions, but she still insisted on going. If something happened to the young miss? Qin Ning shook her head with a smile. She turned around to look at Xiao Ru's worried face and couldn't help giggling as she said, "Of course I know that they don't have good intentions, but I don't have any good intentions either. Since they want to play, then I'll play with them. You don't need to worry about me. They think I'm a vegetarian sheep, but they never thought I was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Perhaps I'll go wild and eat them all." Xiao Ru laughed at her words, but she was still worried. "Young miss, if you really want to go, then let this servant go with you. It'll be good to look after them. If you go with me, what if they have bad intentions towards you? At that time, my hands will be tied." "Xiao Ru, what are you worried about? That Chen Baiyun can't beat me and she can't compare to me in terms of scheming. If she meets me, then she'll be the unlucky one. When have you ever seen me suffer a loss?" Xiao Ru thought about it. Qin Ning wasn't wrong at all. Every time the second miss wanted to harm the young miss, she would always end up losing the rice used to steal a chicken. However, she wouldn't turn back until she hit the wall and continued to provoke the young miss. "Alright, then you have to be careful, young miss. If you come back missing a single hair, then this servant will strangle the second miss." She pouted and said. Qin Ning smiled as she pinched her cheeks. She stood up and turned around. With a smile she said, "Do I look good?" She rarely dressed up. Today she was only wearing a simple and elegant moonlight-colored blouse and a soft and light lily skirt. Her face was clean without any makeup, but she looked light and agile, elegant and otherworldly. Xiao Ru nodded and said, "Young miss is 100 times prettier than the second miss. It's a pity that His Highness is a blind person, so he will never see you." Thinking of this, she wanted to give a sigh. If His Highness could see the young miss beauty, he would not be as cold to the young miss as he was right now. Although bodyguard He and that immortal-like young master were very good, she still hoped that the young miss could be with His Highness. After all, His Highness was the man that the young miss had always loved. Qin Ning revealed a smile. Her dress fluttered as she walked out. "Eldest miss, you don't want to put on rouge today? Aren't you afraid His Highness will see your face?" Xiao Ru suddenly remembered and chased after him to ask, "Do you think Qin Baiyun will let Chu Xiaoyang see my face? If I'm not wrong, Chu Xiaoyang will not appear today." Qin Ning said with a smile. The place Qin Baiyun invited her to was not somewhere else, it was the Little Mirror Lake. Chapter 336. It had to be said that Qin Baiyun had spent quite a bit of effort on today's sightseeing tour. She had actually prepared a beautiful boat with tea, fresh fruits and everything that could be found on it. Standing on the shore, she smiled as she watched Qin Ning slowly approach. When she saw Qin Ning's beautiful face without any makeup, her smile froze on her lips. Her right hand that was hidden in her sleeve couldn't help clenching into a fist. Miss Qin, who was standing beside her, noticed her strange expression and quietly said, "Second miss, you can't reveal any flaws. No matter how beautiful this cheap person's face is, it won't be long before she turns into an ugly monster." Qin Baiyun felt a lot more comfortable. She came forward with a smile and affectionately held Qin Ning's hand. "Why is elder sister so late? Little sister has been waiting for elder sister for a long time." Her hands were painted with bright red nail polish, making her hands look as white as snow. Qin Ning looked down and her eyes fell on the nail polish on her nails. She looked up at her and revealed a smile as she said, "Every time I see little sister, it's always so fragrant, and today it's even more fragrant. Little sister has such a fragrant smell, why aren't you thinking of elder sister?" Qin Baiyun revealed a gentle smile. "Elder sister has wronged Yun. How could little sister forget about elder sister when she has something good?" She turned to Miss Qin and said, "Why aren't you bringing out the gift I prepared for elder sister?" Miss Qin held a brocade box and respectfully presented it to Qin Ning with both hands. "Princess consort, this is the honey perfume that the second miss has prepared for you. It was given to the second miss by His Highness and the second miss was not willing to use it, so she specially kept it for the princess consort." Qin Ning smiled as she received it. Mother Qin's mouth is becoming sweeter. She opened the brocade box and saw a palm-sized glass bottle inside. The fragrance inside was a honey yellow color and a sweet fragrance wafted into her nose. In this era, glass was more expensive than gold. This glass bottle was worth quite a bit, so it could be imagined that the fragrance it contained must be incomparably precious. Qinning knew how precious this thing was. She knew that Qin Baiyun was really willing to pay a heavy price for it. She smiled as she picked up the bottle and played with it in her hand. I really like this honey perfume. Thank you, little sister, for your kind intentions, but elder sister came in a hurry and forgot to prepare a gift for little sister. I hope little sister won't blame me. How could little sister blame elder sister? The wind is strong by the lake. Elder sister, let's talk on the boat. Qin Ning noticed that Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen were secretly exchanging glances with each other. There was a look of pride in their eyes. She pretended she didn't see it. She smiled as she stepped onto the plank and walked onto the boat. Why didn't elder sister bring anyone to serve you? Did Xiaoru not come with you? Qin Baiyun looked behind Qin Ning and asked in a concerned voice. Xiaoru caught a cold and I was afraid that the wind would worsen her illness, so I had her stay in the room. Little sister must have a lot of servants by your side. What, did little sister only bring mother Qin? Qin Ning's eyes swept over the boat. Little sister, I'm not sure. Us sisters are talking, so why do we have to let unrelated people stand on the side? We'll just have them wait on the shore. Nanny is enough to take care of them. Qin Baiyun pursed her lips into a smile. The boat was transparent on all sides, and when the curtains were pulled up, a gentle breeze blew across the lake, blowing up the willows on the shore. The surrounding scenery was unobstructed. Miss Chen was at the back of the boat and there was only Qin Ning and Qin Baiyun on the boat. Chapter 337. Qin Ning followed her line of sight and saw that the boat was slowly approaching the shore. There was actually a large flower garden there, filled with beautiful purples and red flowers. The fragrance was fragrant and there were butterflies flying around. A cool breeze blew across the lake, bringing with it the fragrance of flowers. Qin Baiyun's expression was a bit nervous. Her right hand picked up the wine jug and poured 2 cups of wine. Picking up 1 cup, she placed it in front of Qin Ning with a smile. Elder sister, this is fruit wine. The taste is very sweet, but the alcohol taste is very light. Elder sister will definitely like it. Qin Ning had already noticed that when she was pouring the wine, the nail polish on her pinky finger had lightly brushed across the wine in front of her. Her heart already understood and she thought, so this is what you want to do, it's too simple. She pretended not to know and picked up the wine cup. With a smile she said, if little sister says it's good wine, then the taste will definitely not be bad. She raised it to her lips and was about to drink it. Qin Baiyun couldn't help holding her breath. Ah, there's a person over there, it looks like His Highness. Qin Ning suddenly pointed to the left side of the shore. Qin Baiyun's body trembled and she almost knocked over the fruit plate in front of her. She immediately turned to look in the direction Qin Ning was pointing at. Even Miss Qin, who was rowing the oars, nervously trembled as she turned her head. Qin Ning easily swapped her wine cup with Qin Baiyun's. With a casual smile she said, I saw wrong. It's not His Highness but rather a tree stump. Qin Baiyun looked over and saw that it really was a tree stump. She was already covered in a cold sweat. This fruit wine is really good. Little sister, elder sister has already finished it, why isn't little sister drinking it? Qin Ning smiled as she picked up the cup and drank it all in 1 gulp. Qin Baiyun came back to her senses. Seeing that Qin Ning's cup was empty, a look of joy flashed in her eyes. She also picked up the cup and drank it all in 1 gulp, calming herself down. Qin Ning calling him His Highness had almost scared her out of her wits. If he appeared here today and saw Qin Ning, then all of her plans would have gone to waste. She had already sent people to ask Shaoanzi about it. Although the little mirror lake was beautiful, His Highness would never come here normally. So, she had decided to choose this place for the lake trip. Seeing Qin Ning drink the wine, her heart calmed down. She pointed at the flower garden in front of them and said, Elder sister, look. The flowers over there are so beautiful. How about we take the boat closer to take a look? Of course. Qin Ning nodded with a smile. She saw that there was nothing strange with Qin Baiyun drinking the wine. She looked over at the flower garden and thought of her actions today. Her fingers touched the honey perfume in her sleeve and she could already guess what Qin Baiyun was planning to do. Alright, since she likes to play, I'll play with her to my heart's content. Qin Ning smiled and she said, Qin Ning said that Qin Ning of the Ningling of Chen was Ning. The pleasure boat gradually approached the shore, and the fragrance of the flowers became even more intoxicating. Clusters of fresh flowers bloomed under the bright sun, creating a beautiful sight. The 2 of them were admiring the flowers when they suddenly heard a strange buzzing sound. Looking towards the direction of the sound, They saw bees gathering honey in the flowers flying towards the pleasure boat at the same time. The two of them were enjoying the flowers when they suddenly heard a strange, sound. Looking over, they saw bees gathering honey from the flowers flying over to the boat. The flower garden was very large, and with the flowers blooming, there were quite a few bees attracted. But for some reason these bees all gave up on the nectar and flew over to the boat. Chapter 338. She was already prepared. She took out the honey perfume bottle she had hidden in her sleeve, and a sweet fragrance filled the air. When the swarm of bees smelled this scent, they began to buzz loudly as they all flew at Qin Ning. When Qin Baiyun and Miss Qin saw this, they couldn't help revealing a smile. Qin Ning waved her right hand, and the small bottle that she had uncorked rolled to Qin Baiyun's feet. Qin Baiyun only wanted to watch a good show and did not know anything at all. At this moment, the swarm of bees in the air suddenly changed targets. They gave up on Qin Ning and charged at Qin Baiyun. Qin Baiyun and Miss Qin were shocked. They could not understand what had happened. So painful. They heard Qin Baiyun give a sharp cry as a bee stung her face. It was so painful that tears came out of her eyes. Get lost. Are you stinking bees crazy? Why are you stinging my family's second miss? Miss Qin waved her sleeves to drive away the swarm of bees while loudly cursing. The swarm of bees did not care about her cursing at all. It was like they had a deep grudge against Qin Baiyun as they charged at Qin Baiyun. Qin Baiyun's body felt like it was being stabbed by countless needles at the same time, causing her to cry out in pain. Her hands covered her head, but she couldn't cover her face. Miss Qin desperately waved her sleeves, driving away the bees on Qin Baiyun's face. In the end, the bees also hated her, so they stung her head, hands and face. It's so painful. Nanny, save me, quickly save me. Qin Baiyun cried out. Her eyes were swollen from being stung by the bees and she could not open them at all. Miss Qin ignored the pain and quickly thought of a plan. She took off her clothes and tightly covered Qin Baiyun's face, but the bees continued to charge at Qin Baiyun. The sharp stinger on their tails pierced through her clothes and stung Qin Baiyun's body. Qin Baiyun was in so much pain that she couldn't even cry. It was strange that all the bees were charging at Qin Baiyun. Qin Ning was just 3 steps away from them, but there was not a single bee by her side. She was smiling as she watched the good show in front of her. If she hadn't seen through Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen's trap, the one crying for her parents right now would be her. It had to be said that Qin Baiyun's poisonous plan was a bit out of her expectations. But thinking about it, Qin Baiyun would not be able to think of this with her intelligence, so it had to be Miss Chen's idea. This Miss Chen's heart was very sinister. If she was left by Qin Baiyun's side, who knew what kind of tricks she would come up with? Seeing that there were more and more bees gathering, if this continued, Qin Baiyun would die from the bee poison. Qin Ning was not a soft-hearted person. If the other side wanted to harm her, she would return it 10 times over. But when she saw Qin Baiyun's slightly swollen belly, she couldn't bear to let an innocent little life die like this. My dear sister, aren't you being muddle-headed? As long as you jump into the lake, the bees won't be able to bite you. She sighed faintly and reminded him. Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen's eyes lit up. Without any hesitation they jumped into the lake one after the other. Putong putong. Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen's eyes lit up. The two of them did not hesitate, and with a putong putong, they both jumped into the lake. The water of the lake quickly rose above their heads. After Qin Baiyun and Miss Chin jumped into the lake, they quickly drank several mouthfuls of water. Being hit by the cold lake water, they both woke up. Damn it. Qin Baiyun and Miss Chin jumped into the lake and drank several mouthfuls of water. When they were hit by the cold lake water, they both woke up. Damn. They couldn't swim at all. Chapter 339. When Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen's hearts were filled with despair, they heard a dong sound. A wooden stool fell beside the two of them and floated up and down. The two of them grabbed onto the stool like they were holding onto straw. Qin Baiyun, you've tried to harm me time and time again, but I can't bear to let the child in your stomach die. Looking at your unborn child, I'll let you live for now. But I'm warning you, if there's a next time, I won't be as lenient as I was this time. Qin Ning's eyes were deep as she stared at Qin Baiyun in the water. She slowly and clearly said this. Her slender figure stood at the front of the boat. Her face was like ice and her dress fluttered in the wind as she flew away. Qin Baiyun and Miss Chen's hearts trembled at the same time. They didn't have time to think as they grabbed onto the stool and desperately paddled to the shore. It was a good thing that they were not far from the shore. After paddling for a while, the two of them finally climbed onto the shore naked and fell onto the shore in a sorry state. Qin Baiyun's throat was filled with nausea as she opened her mouth to spit out the lake water in her stomach. Miss Qin was vomiting while narrowing her eyes. She glared at Qin Ning on the boat in the middle of the lake and her lips curled into a fierce smile. Yun, what's wrong? A shout suddenly came from behind the two of them. Following that, a figure fell from the sky and appeared beside Qin Baiyun. He picked up the naked Qin Baiyun with a look of panic on his handsome face. Your Highness. Qin Baiyun never would have dreamed that Chu Xiaoyang would appear here. She had just escaped from death, and seeing the man she loved appear in front of her, she was pleasantly surprised. She tightly hugged his neck and began to cry. Yun, don't cry. Tell this king what happened. Why are you soaking wet? Did you fall into the lake? Tell this king what's going on. Chu Xiaoyang tightly hugged Qin Baiyun while tightly knitting his brows. Qin Baiyun just shook her head while crying, burying her face in his chest. Her face was red and purple from being stung by bees. How could she dare let the man she loved see her ugly appearance? Miss Qin, tell this king what happened. Tell me the truth. If there is even half a lie, this king will take your head. Chu Xiaoyang saw Qin Baiyun's sorry appearance and his heart filled with pain. He turned to Miss Qin and shouted. Miss Qin lowered her head and rolled her eyes. She fell to the ground and cried, reporting to your highness, it's the princess consort. It's that cheap woman Qin Ning? Chu Xiaoyang's handsome face sunk. It was so dark that it seemed like it was going to drip water. He shouted in a deep voice, speak. It's like this. The concubine consort and the princess consort had not seen each other for several days and missed each other, so she sent this old servant to invite the princess consort to a boat tour. Who would have thought that the bees that were collecting honey would suddenly fly onto the boat, and for some unknown reason, they all began to sting the concubine consort. This old servant quickly helped the concubine consort chase away the bees, but at this time, the princess consort took advantage of the concubine consort's unprepared and forcefully pushed the concubine consort into the lake. In a moment of desperation, this old servant threw a wooden stool next to the concubine consort and also jumped into the lake. The concubine consort and this old servant used the wooden stool to escape with their lives. Miss Chen's mind worked very quickly and she immediately came up with a flawless reason. Chapter 340. She's still on the boat in the middle of the lake. Miss Chen pointed at the lake and then looked down, hiding the proud look in her eyes. Chu Xiaoyang did not even have time to turn around before he heard a large sound come from the lake. Hong. The three of them trembled at the same time. Chu Xiaoyang quickly turned around and saw a few broken pieces of wood floating on the lake. There was no trace of the boat at all. This is bad. The boat is sinking, the boat is sinking. Miss Chen shouted in a panic. Elder sister is still on the boat. Your Highness, let go of me, I want to save elder sister. Qin Baiyun screamed out. She struggled out of Chu Xiaoyang's embrace and crawled to the shore. Chu Xiaoyang stood there in a daze, looking at the ripples on the surface of the lake. His face instantly turned paler than paper. Qin Ning. He let out a loud roar like a wounded beast and suddenly leaped into the air. His body was like a flying goose as he flew towards the ripples in the lake. Then without hesitation he dove into the deep lake. The cold and dark lake water quickly submerged his head. He suddenly thought of something. Damn, he didn't know how to swim. The pressurized lake water rushed into his nose and mouth and the fear of death once again enveloped him. His surroundings were completely dark as he slowly sank to the bottom of the lake, just like that day 8 years ago. But this time there would not be a Qin Baiyun to save him. Was he going to die? Was he really going to die? He once again felt the feeling of suffocation. At this moment, Chu Xiaoyang's eyes suddenly lit up. He saw a pale white lotus flower blossoming in the water, and then it quickly floated towards him. His heart shook heavily and his eyes widened in disbelief. Even his heart stopped beating. It was her. After 8 years, she had finally appeared in front of him again. She had grown up. From a 7 or 8-year-old little girl, she had grown into a slim and graceful young lady, but that elegant and refined face made him recognize her at a glance. It was her. It was her. Chu Xiaoyang's heart was so happy that it almost exploded. He had completely forgotten his fear, forgotten the threat of death, and forgotten everything. He only had her in his eyes. At this moment he was filled with gratitude towards the heavens. At the last moment before his death, he was finally able to see the person he had been thinking about for 8 years. He reached out his hand to her. Even if it was an illusion, he still wanted to hold her hand before he died. As long as he could hold her hand while he died, he would feel incomparable happiness. As long as he could hold her hand while he died, he would feel incomparable happiness. Chen Ning did not care about the hand that was grabbing her. She quickly swam to his side and grabbed his arm, using all her strength to drag him to the surface. Chu Xiaoyang's eyes were closed and his face was pale, not moving at all. He had already fainted. However, his grip on her hand was firm from beginning to end. With a bow sound, the two of them finally reached the water. Chen Ning took a deep breath. Because Chu Xiaoyang was tightly holding her hand, she could only use her other arm to swim. She was so tired that she almost became a water ghost at the bottom of the lake. Chu Xiao. Are you an idiot? You obviously don't know how to swim, yet you jumped into the water to save people. Are you going to save me or am I going to save you? Chapter 341. At this time, the lake shore was already in chaos. When the guards heard the news and heard that His Highness had fallen into the lake, they were all scared out of their wits. Like dumplings, they all jumped into the water with a putong sound. Everyone quickly found Chu Xiaoyang and Chen Ning floating on the surface of the water and were filled with joy. Whether it was those that could swim or not, they all desperately swam towards the two of them. Chen Ning knew that once the guards arrived, Chu Xiaoyang would be saved. Her body was wet and she was not willing to see anyone. She forcefully opened Chu Xiaoyang's fingers and pushed the unconscious him towards the guards. Then she jumped into the water and made a splash as she dove towards the bottom of the lake. The guards only saw the fairy-like face of the young girl flash in front of them. Then, her fine black hair fluttered in the wind and spread out on the surface of the water. Her skirt fluttered in the wind like a blooming water lotus. She swam towards the depths of the lake and quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. Everyone couldn't help rubbing their eyes, thinking that they were hallucinating. They had actually seen a fairy in the lake. They worked together to bring Chu Xiaoyang to the shore. Chen Baiyun was crying on Chu Xiaoyang's body. No matter who pulled her, she was not willing to let go. It was Miss Chen who said, "Second miss, don't be in a rush to cry. It's more important to save His Highness first." The experienced guards forcefully pressed down on Chu Xiaoyang's chest, forcing out the water from his abdomen. After a while, Chu Xiaoyang's chest finally began to slowly rise and fall. His long eyelashes slightly trembled. His brows knit together and his right hand clenched, but he found that his hand was empty. He suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. "Don't go," he forcefully shouted. "Your Highness is awake. Your Highness is awake." Cheers came from all around him. Chu Xiaoyang tightly knit his brows. Before he was fully awake, a wet and soft body suddenly jumped into his embrace. It was Chen Baiyun. She tightly hugged him and cried out, "Your Highness, you're fine, you're fine. God bless you. If something happened to Your Highness, Yun, or wouldn't want to live." This was the first time Chu Xiaoyang did not immediately hug her. After a while, he slowly raised his right hand and placed it on Chen Baiyun's shoulder. In a hoarse voice he said, "Yun, was it you who saved me?" Chen Baiyun's body trembled. She did not dare raise her face that had been stung beyond recognition and could only cry. Chu Xiaoyang stared at her lowered head and asked, "Yun, is it you?" Chen Baiyun felt her entire body turn stiff and of her tongue. Even her tongue could not speak, but she was still. Miss Chen quickly kneeled down and replied, "Reporting to Your Highness, the concubine consort is pregnant and had suffered a great shock. When she saw you fall into the water, she went crazy and wanted to jump into the water to save you. This old servant was worried about the child in the concubine consort's stomach, so I desperately pulled the concubine consort back and shouted for help. It was a good thing that the guards arrived in time and saved Your Highness. This old. I asked Your Highs." Her words were flawless. After Chu Xiaoyang heard this, his tense face relaxed a bit. He did not look at Miss Chen and just stared at Chen Baiyun. "Yin, is it like this?" Chapter 342. She suddenly raised her hand and slapped Miss Chen's face. Turning around, she fell into Chu Xiaoyang's embrace while crying. "Your Highness, I know you must be angry with Yun." She suddenly couldn't breathe and fainted. Miss Chen immediately cried out in shock, "Concubine consort! Concubine consort! This is bad, the concubine has fainted. Your Highness, please save the concubine. No matter what mistake the concubine has made, her stomach still has Your Highness' flesh and blood." She kneeled down and kowtowed to Chu Xiaoyang. He secretly praised Chen Baiyun in his heart. Good acting. She really is someone who grew up drinking her milk. She did not believe that a man would not do anything when he saw his beloved woman faint. especially when that woman was pregnant with his flesh and blood. Sure enough, Chu Xiaoyang picked up Qin Baiyun. His back was straight, but he did not immediately leave. Rather, he turned to look at the mirror-like surface of the lake before using his qinggong. It was as if his feet were not touching the ground. Miss Qin waited until she could not even see his shadow before letting out a sigh of relief, like she had escaped a great disaster. Of course, she knew that the one who saved Chu Xiaoyang from the lake was not someone else, it was the Qin Ning that she wanted to kill. She did not have time to think about why Qin Ning did not die from the explosion. She turned around and coldly looked at the guards that looked like they were drowned in water. You better keep your mouths shut about today's matter and not say a single word. Otherwise, the concubine consort will be very, very unhappy. If the concubine consort is unhappy, His Highness will also be unhappy. If His Highness is unhappy, then you won't be able to keep your heads. Her eyes flickered with a venomous glint, and every guard who made eye contact with her shuddered involuntarily. Of course they knew what Miss Qin meant, so they all nodded. In fact, they hadn't seen anything. The lake fairy was most likely an illusion. If they told His Highness about this, perhaps they would be scolded or beaten by His Highness. For the guards, it was better to have less trouble than less trouble. The doctor quickly finished treating Qin Baiyun. Reporting to Your Highness, the concubine consort has only fainted from shock. It is nothing serious. Only the concubine consort seemed to have been stung by a bee before falling into the water, and there is a lot of bee venom in her body. I'm afraid she will be in pain for a few more days. This minister has an ointment that was given by a divine doctor. It has a miraculous effect, and after applying it, it will greatly reduce the concubine consort's pain. The doctor took out a tube of ointment from his medical box and gave it to Chu Xiaoyang. Chu Xiaoyang did not take it and just gave a casual sound. His expression was indifferent, completely different from his usual concerned expression. The doctor's hand awkwardly stopped in midair. He felt it was strange. Everyone could see how worried His Highness was for the concubine consort. But when his eyes turned to Qin Baiyun, he understood. That enchanting face was now blue and purple, looking as ugly as a pig's head. When he first saw her, he did not recognize that she was the #1 beauty of the capital, Qin Baiyun. It really is love when one's beauty fades. Even the wise and powerful King Dingyuan looked at one's face. He wanted to curry favor with Chu Xiaoyang, but he had been given the cold shoulder. He did not know whether he should take back the ointment or not. Many thanks, doctor. Miss Qin saw this and quickly applied the ointment, thanking the doctor. Chapter 343. Every time the doctor came to take Qin Baiyun's pulse, he would receive quite a bit of rewards. Today he had given out a tube of precious ointment for nothing. You can leave as well. Chu Xiaoyang's cold eyes looked at Miss Qin, and Miss Qin shivered. Your Highness, the concubine consort has just woken up and needs someone to take care of her. She was not assured and wanted to stay here to remind Qin Baiyun, so she gathered her courage and said this. Before she could finish, Chu Xiaoyang coldly said, Scram. Killing intent filled the air. Miss Qin did not dare stay in the room and quickly left, but she was secretly complaining in her heart. She wanted to eavesdrop outside the door, but she suddenly heard a chi sound. Something had pierced through the window, and with a pa sound, it hit her face and knocked out 2 of her teeth. If you don't leave now, I'll feed you to the dogs. Chu Xiaoyang's cold voice came from the room. Miss Qin was so scared that she almost pissed her pants. She quickly ran away. There was only Chu Xiaoyang and Qin Baiyun left in the room. Qin Baiyun's eyes were closed and she was lying on the bed without moving, as if she was unconscious. But her uneven breathing had already betrayed her. Her heart was beating fast and she was so panicked that she did not know what to do. She did not dare open her eyes because she was afraid. Although she did not open her eyes, she could still feel Chu Xiaoyang's gaze on her face. She did not see what her face looked like, but she felt like there were countless needles stabbing her. But compared to the fear in her heart, she forgot about the pain for a moment. Chu Xiaoyang did not say a word. Qin Baiyun did not dare open her eyes. The room was very quiet and she could not hear Chu Xiaoyang's breathing, as if he was not here at all. Only Qin Baiyun's controlled breathing could be heard. To her, this was a kind of indescribable suffering and torture. Yun, are you awake? When Qin Baiyun was about to give up, she suddenly heard Chu Xiaoyang's voice come from above her head. There was no killing intent or indifference, it was just the same gentle voice as usual. Qin Baiyun's tears began to flow down her face as they flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Her heart that was in her throat finally fell to the ground. She had thought that when she woke up, He would angrily question her and blame her, but there was no such thing. He was just as gentle as before. She choked with sobs as she nodded. She still did not dare open her eyes and did not dare look at Chu Xiaoyang's face. Bai Xiao Yun Chu was a Bai Xiao, Chu, Yun, Chu, was. Chu Xiaoyang sat in front of her bed and took the tube of ointment. His tone and expression were the same as usual, still filled with warmth. Only his eyes were deep and serene, like a bottomless lake. It was a Chin Yun. Your Highness you. Why are you so good to Yun? Chin Bai Yun couldn't hold it in any more as she began to sob. Chu Xiaoyang said in a soft voice, because you've always been good to this king, of course this king has to treat you well. You saved this king 8 years ago and this king has never repaid you. This king will definitely repay you in the future and treat you well, very well. Hearing 8 years ago, Chin Bai Yun's crying suddenly stopped and her body became stiff. Chapter 344. The ointment had a cool aura and after it was applied, Chin Bai Yun felt much more comfortable. Her face no longer hurt that much. But the sweetest thing about her was her heart. She opened her teary eyes and fearfully looked at Chu Xiaoyang. Your Highness, does Yun look very ugly right now? If Yun becomes an ugly monster, will you not like Yun anymore? Is it that you won't love Yun as much as before? Chu Xiaoyang's lips curled into a smile. That slightly evil smile made his face look strangely handsome. Chin Bai Yun's heart skipped a beat. She foolishly looked at his face, not being able to move her eyes away at all. His hands were gentle as he continued to apply the ointment on her face. His beautiful black eyes revealed a gentle smile. Yun, do you think this king likes your face? This king can tell you that no matter what your face looks like, this king's desire to repay you will always be the same. Chin Bai Yun suddenly felt like joy had fallen from the sky. Her eyes filled with joy. Your Highness, you really treat Yun well. She bit her lips and was so excited that she couldn't speak. Chu Xiaoyang revealed a smile and his eyes fell onto her slightly bulging stomach. He slowly placed his hand on it and for the first time, his face revealed a look of concern for his unborn child. You have to take care of your body. You can't let anything happen to this child. This king will treat you well in the future and treat this child very well. Chin Bai Yun was even more excited as she blurted out, if he is a boy, will your Highness give him the title of successor? Successor? Chu Xiaoyang slightly paused. His eyes sparkled and he nodded with a smile, of course. As long as you safely give birth to the child, everything will naturally go according to your wishes. Your Highness. Chin Bai Yun was so excited that she couldn't control herself. She couldn't help throwing herself into Chu Xiaoyang's embrace. Chu Xiaoyang held her shoulder and let her lie down. He placed his index finger on her lips. The doctor said that your body is weak right now and you fell into the water, so you need to rest. We still have a long time in the future, so we can slowly talk about it. There is no need to rush. Chin Bai Yun's heart was even sweeter than honey. Especially when he said, we still have a long time in the future. It gave her a peace of mind. Her eyes were filled with affection as she gently nodded. Suddenly her brows knit together. What's wrong? Does your face hurt again? Chu Xiaoyang did not miss any of her expressions. Your Highness, tell Yun, elder sister. How is elder sister? Chin Bai Yun grabbed Chu Xiaoyang's hand, filled with worry and concern. Chu Xiaoyang's face instantly sunk and he let go of her hand. He coldly said, Yun Bai Yun. Your Highness, Yun's just wants to know if my sister is safe. Yun's is heart. Then this king will tell you, that cheap woman is not dead. Chu Xiaoyang's voice was even colder than ice. Chin Bai Yun timidly said, Your Highness, please don't blame elder sister. Yun believes that elder sister didn't push Yun into the water on purpose. It must be because elder sister saw the bees stinging Yun and wanted to help Yun chase them away, so she wasn't careful. The wet nurse must have made a mistake and thought that elder sister pushed Yun into the water. Your Highness, please forgive elder sister. Chapter 345. She thought that after Chu Xiaoyang heard this, he would angrily look for Chen Ning. Who would have thought that Chu Xiaoyang's brows would jump up? Oh, Yun, are you saying that it wasn't Chen Ning who pushed you into the water and that Miss Chen was mistaken? Chin Bai Yun wanted to bite her tongue in regret, but she couldn't take back her words. She could only vaguely say, Yun just doesn't think that elder sister is that kind of person. Chu Xiaoyang suddenly stood up and his face was filled with anger. Such a bold Miss Chen. This king thought she was your wet nurse, so I agreed to keep her by your side, but who would have thought that she would be this useless? Not only did she not protect her master, causing you to fall into the water, she even tried to defile you. This kind of servant, how could she not be ruthlessly taught a lesson? Someone come. He angrily shouted out the door. Pass on this king's orders, punish this servant Miss Chen with 20 family punishments. If she dares to do it again, she will be beaten to death. Chen Baiyun's face turned pale in fright as she tightly bit her lower lip. She wanted to plead for Miss Chen, but seeing Chu Xiaoyang's fierce appearance, she did not dare say anything. Tears began to fall from her eyes. Hearing Miss Chen's pitiful cries from being beaten, she couldn't help digging her nails into her palms. Miss Chen was her wet nurse, so every time she was beaten, Miss Chen would let out a pitiful cry. It was like a knife cutting into her heart. But she couldn't say it out loud. The reason why Miss Chen was being beaten was all because she had accidentally said a few words. Her original intention was to provoke Chu Xiaoyang's anger towards Qin Ning, but she never thought that she would bring trouble upon herself and burn her own butt. In an instant she almost spat out blood from her vomiting. This king knows that Miss Chen is your wet nurse, but it is the master's fault for not teaching a servant. This king sending people to teach her a lesson is for Yun'er's own good. This way she will serve you more attentively in the future. Otherwise, when she just entered the palace and something like this happened to you, if I don't teach her a lesson, how can this king convince the others? You won't blame this king for being heartless, right? Chu Xiaoyang said this while gently taking a handkerchief and wiping the tears from her eyes. The deep love on his face instantly blocked Chen Baiyun's mouth. Chen Baiyun's heart churned. Hearing Chu Xiaoyang's sweet words, it was like eating a spoonful of honey. But hearing Miss Chen's pitiful cries, it was like being fried in a pan, an indescribable feeling. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She could only lower her head and bite her lips so hard that it almost bled. Your Highness is doing this for Yun'er. How could Yun'er blame your Highness? She finally managed to squeeze out these words. Come, lie down and obediently sleep. The most important thing is to take care of your body first. Chu Xiaoyang carefully helped her lie down and personally covered her with the blanket. Qin Baiyun looked at him wanting to say something. Your Highness, why did you jump into the lake? Was it to save my elder sister? She bit her lips and finally asked. Chu Xiaoyang's hand paused, then he covered her with the blanket as if nothing had happened. Do you think that this king will save that bitch? He asked with a blank expression. Then your Highness. This king was confused from anger. I heard that cheap woman pushed you into the water and this king wanted to personally kill her. In that moment I actually forgot that I couldn't swim. It was a good thing the guards saved this king. I've made you worry for this king. Chu Xiaoyang's words made Qin Baiyun's heart fall down. She let out a long sigh and revealed a very sweet smile. Chapter 346. Chu Xiaoyang slowly put down the ointment in his hand and stood in front of the bed, staring at her sleeping face. There was no expression on his handsome face at all. After a long time he opened the door and walked out. In the yard, Miss Chen's hair was disheveled and her face was covered in tears. Her butt had been beaten and when she saw Chu Xiaoyang, she began to tremble. Go in and properly serve the concubine consort. If anything happens to her or the child in her stomach, this king will not be this polite next time. After Chu Xiaoyang coldly said this, his robe fluttered and he left without looking back. Miss Chen had been beaten 20 times for no reason. She had thought that her plan had failed and she would not be able to escape death, but who would have thought that things would not go as she thought? Listening to His Highness' tone, it was clear that he loved and cared about the second miss. Could it be? His Highness did not know anything at all? She endured the pain as she entered Qin Baiyun's room and found that Qin Baiyun was sleeping very sweetly on the bed. There was a layer of ointment applied to her bruised face and the remaining ointment was placed on the pillow in front of the bed. Her heart was filled with doubt. The ointment on the second miss face, was it applied by His Highness? If His Highness knew what she and the second miss had done, he would have already given the order to execute them. Why would he apply ointment for the second miss? Moreover, the second miss lips were curled up, so it was clear that she was having a good dream. That's right, His Highness really did not know. Miss Chen patted her chest and let out a long sigh of relief. After Chu Xiaoyang left the intoxicated flower pavilion, he called the captain of the secret guards. After giving a few orders, the captain left to carry out his orders. For the rest of the day he stayed in the Peach Blossom Cove study alone, not taking a single step out. When night fell and the candle in the room was lit, he sat alone under the lamp, silently pondering. When the drum reached the third hour, he suddenly shook his robe and jumped out of the window. The moonlight melted, and the shadows of the flowers were silent. He stood under a peach blossom tree, and a beautiful and charming face appeared in front of him. Today, at the bottom of the cold lake, when he was struggling in despair and death, he saw her again. At that time he was already in a semi-conscious state, but before he fainted, he clearly remembered holding her hand. But when he woke up, she had disappeared once again. It wasn't a dream. It definitely wasn't a dream. Chu Xiaoyang gritted his teeth and muttered to himself. He suddenly used his qinggong and stepped on the moonlight, running towards the flowing cloud pavilion. Who is it? Stop. Before he reached the entrance of the flowing cloud pavilion, he suddenly heard a shout from behind him. Following this, a sharp palm wind slashed at his back. Chu Xiaoyang's sleeve waved and he released the palm energy. He turned around and the faint moonlight shone on his cold, arrogant, and handsome face. This subordinate deserves to die. This subordinate didn't know that Your Highness had arrived and offended Your Highness. Please forgive me, Your Highness. The black-clothed secret guard immediately knelt on the ground, trembling in fear. You've done well. You can leave now. Chu Xiaoyang unexpectedly did not become angry and just calmly waved his hand. Chu Xiaoyang's eyes Chu Xiaoyang's eyes flashed. Chu Xiaoyang's eyes sparkled. His figure moved like a shadow as he entered the flowing cloud pavilion. He walked over to Chen Ning's window and saw that there were no candles in the room. It seemed like the person inside was already asleep. Chapter 347. A faint fragrance entered his nose. With the moonlight shining from the window, he could clearly see a slender figure lying on the bed. She was facing the bed and her long black hair was scattered across the pillow, revealing the back of her neck that was as white as snow. Peng 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 peng. In the room that was so quiet one could hear a pin drop. Chu Xiaoyang suddenly heard his own rapid heartbeat. It was beating so loudly that he suspected that she could hear it even when she was sleeping on the bed. Damn. He took in a deep breath and calmed his violent heartbeat. His eyes were glued to the figure on the bed. Her breathing was light and she was in a deep sleep. Chu Xiaoyang slowly walked over step by step. The curtains were light and the hooks were lowered. As long as she turned around, he would be able to clearly see her face with the moonlight in front of the bed. He couldn't help holding his breath. Chen Ning's sleep was not peaceful. She kept dreaming and in her dreams there were many figures. There was Chu Xiao by Mo Chuan and Qin by Yun. If it wasn't for her cleverness discovering the hidden explosives on the boat and jumping into the lake, she would have been blown to pieces along with the boat. It seemed like she had underestimated Qin by Yun and Miss Chen's determination to kill her. She saw herself sinking to the bottom of the lake and saw Qin by Yun and Miss Chen grinning at her from the shore. Suddenly, a figure loudly called out her name and jumped off the shore, jumping into the lake. It was actually Chu Xiaoyang. Then she saw him drinking large mouthfuls of water and spitting out bubbles like a fish, slowly sinking to the bottom of the lake. He didn't know how to swim. Then why did he jump in? He wouldn't be trying to save her, right? Crazy. She gave him this word in her heart. She wanted to ignore him and dive into the water, but a familiar scene suddenly flashed in her mind. She couldn't help swimming through the lake water towards him. She saw the guards saving him, saw Qin by Yun throwing herself into his arms, and saw Miss Chen saying something. She didn't need to listen to know that this master and servant were framing her again. But she was not afraid. If those two dared to provoke her again, she would not show any mercy. The only thing she was worried about was Chu Xiaoyang. That idiot would definitely believe Qin by Yun's words and he would definitely cause trouble for her. Now that Mo Chuan was not by her side and Chu Xiaoyang's martial arts were high, what if he sneaked into her room in the middle of the night? Chen Ning suddenly shivered in her dream. She seemed to see a pair of dark eyes, like the eyes of a ferocious beast, staring at her without blinking, making her feel as if there was a thorn in her back. Who? She abruptly woke up from her dream and turned around abruptly. The moment she turned around, the two sides of the veil suddenly fell down. She could only see a tall and straight figure standing outside the veil. She immediately held her breath. She saw that the figure was just standing outside the mosquito net, the wind was blowing the corner of his robe, but he was standing with his hands behind his back, not moving at all. Chen Ning let out a sigh and patted her chest. Chen Ning. If it was Chu Xiaoyang, the first thing he would do would be to strangle her while she was asleep. She wouldn't even know how she died. Xiao Bai? She asked in a probing voice. Xiao Bai? What the hell? Chu Xiaoyang instantly raised his brows. Could it be a cat? He did not say a word. Xiaohei. Qin Ning bit her lips. Xiaohei. What the hell was this? Could it be a dog? Chapter 348. Didn't you say that you would never come back if you left? What are you doing here? I don't want to see you ever again. A pillow suddenly flew out from the curtains and hit Chu Xiaoyang's head. Chu Xiaoyang subconsciously hugged the pillow. He finally realized that the Xiaohei she was talking about was not some random dog or cat, but rather the mysterious black-clothed man. His heart filled with anger as he coldly said, "It's this king." These 3 words were like ice falling to the ground. A familiar voice entered Qin Ning's ears and it was like her acupuncture point had been poked. Chu Xiaoyang. It was actually Chu Xiaoyang. She was stunned for a bit before giving a cold laugh. Your Highness, you came to my room in the middle of the night. Did you accidentally come to the wrong room? Or do you want to silence me? She grabbed the coat on the side of the bed and draped it over her shoulders. If this king wants your life, I can do it at any time. There is no need to wait until the middle of the night. Chu Xiaoyang coldly said. Qin Ning rolled her eyes. Then does this mean that your Highness has come to the wrong room? This is the Flowing Cloud Pavilion, not the Intoxicated Flower Pavilion. Have a safe trip, I won't send you off. Chu Xiaoyang gave a snort. What a sharp mouth. This king did not come to find you to bicker with you. Then why is your Highness here? Could it be that you like me and are afraid that little sister Bai Yun will be jealous, so you came to confess to me behind my little sister's back? She deliberately said this, but she never thought that Chu Xiaoyang would be silent. This was out of her expectations. But then she gave a self-deprecating smile. I know, it must be that after Mimi fell into the water, she must have been whispering to His Highness's Mandarin duck pillow, so His Highness has come to punish me. Tell me, how do you want to help Mimi vent her anger? Chu Xiaoyang calmly said, this king wants to know the truth. Truth? Qin Ning gave a sarcastic smile and said, isn't the truth in little sister's mouth? You believe whatever she says, why do you need to ask me? It's unnecessary. If I say something, will you believe it? Chu Xiaoyang was silent for a bit before suddenly saying word for word, as long as you say it, I will believe it. Qin Ning's heart skipped a beat with a dong sound. Then she began to casually laugh. Her laugh was light and faint. If I say that I didn't even touch a single finger of hers and that she and Miss Qin jumped into the lake by themselves, and I even threw a wooden stool into the water to save their lives, would you believe me? She deliberately used the truth as a lie. Yes. Chu Xiaoyang's reply was simple and straightforward. Qin Ning was stunned. She wondered if there was something wrong with her ears, or if the moon was rising from the west tonight. You believe me? That's strange. I don't even believe it myself, but you do? She sneered. Do you think this king is a fool, an idiot? Do you think this king is blind or deaf? Chu Xiaoyang couldn't help angrily saying as he ground his teeth. Whenever this woman opened her mouth, she would always ignite the anger in his heart. Aren't you? Qin Ning asked in her heart, but she was afraid of angering this temperamental person, so she didn't say anything. Since your Highness isn't stupid, deaf, or blind, then why did you come to my place? This king just wanted to see you. Chu Xiaoyang almost blurted it out, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. You are my Chu Xiaoyang's woman. I came to my own woman's room, what do you think I want to do? If this king tells you that I'm suddenly interested in you, and that I want to... Chapter 349. Chu Xiaoyang, you're shameless. Hearing the meaning behind his words, Qin Ning's face instantly turned red. She instinctively shrank back into the bed, but then she realized that this was a stupid move. If he wanted to use force on her, she would not be able to escape from his hands no matter what. Shameless? Chu Xiaoyang smiled. He stopped in front of the bed, just within arm's reach. This king is your husband. Even if I want you tonight, it is a matter of heaven and earth. It can't be considered shameless, right? He calmly said. Qin Ning's nervous heart almost jumped out. She forcefully grabbed her clothes and cursed through gritted teeth. Chu Xiaoyang, you're shameless. Shameless? Chu Xiaoyang smiled again. His mood seemed to suddenly become very good, especially when he heard her angry and anxious voice. Well, it really was very good. She finally didn't need to use that kind of half-mocking tone to talk to him. He liked this kind of angry her even more. This king has even more shameless things to do. Do you want to know? His voice was frivolous and contained a teasing tone. Qin Ning forcefully bit her lips. If it wasn't for that familiar voice, she would not have believed that the man standing outside the tent that was teasing her was Chu Xiaoyang. This was simply a complete change. This was not the him she was familiar with at all. His eyes were always filled with disgust and his tone was always filled with anger. Didn't he want her dead? That's right, his head must have been hit by water when he fell into the lake today. It had to be like this. Chu Xiaoyang, if you have something to say then say it. If you don't have anything to say then scram. Stop trying to tease me. Qin Ning grabbed another pillow and angrily threw it out of the tent. She suddenly understood and was no longer afraid. If he really did not have any good intentions, would he have waited until now? As early as when she was asleep, he could have done whatever he wanted and eaten her up. Chu Xiaoyang grabbed the pillow she threw at him. It still had her warm body temperature and her unique fragrance on it. It was sweet and refreshing. He really was just trying to scare her, but now he suddenly felt excited. It was like there was a flame burning in his body and he actually had that kind of intention. He forcefully swallowed his saliva and suppressed the desire in his body. This king heard that the eldest princess promised you that on the 10th day of the 4th month, she would invite you to the palace and help you ask the emperor for a decree to separate from this king. Is this true? His voice was calm and did not have a trace of emotion. It was impossible to tell if he was happy or angry. This fellow's news was truly fast. Qin Ning muttered in her heart. She knew that she wouldn't be able to hide this from him, but since he knew, it was good. That's right, your highness is truly resourceful. There is indeed such a thing. She calmly admitted and then suddenly realized. So your highness came to my room in the middle of the night just for this? I feel that we can change the time and place to talk. Doesn't Wang Ye feel that the current situation is a bit inappropriate? Qin Ning stroked her hair. It was a good thing the bed curtain was down. She did not want to let this idiot bastard see her in her pajamas. This king doesn't think it's wrong, Chu Xiaoyang shamelessly said. His eyes seemed like he wanted to see through the curtain and see through her. You haven't seen this king's shameless appearance. If you anger this king does not mind letting you see this king do even more shameless things. Chapter 350. Qin Ning's heart turned cold. She knew that the other side was not trying to scare her. She could hear the beast's heart in his calm voice. She gritted her teeth and said, Chu Xiaoyang, what do you want to say? She was too lazy to beat around the bush with him. After beating around the bush, even the way she called him became impolite. But Chu Xiaoyang was not angry. He seemed to like hearing her call him by his name and not calling him your highness in a fake manner. This king wants to know the reason why you want to separate from this king. The reason why you want to separate? Qin Ning never thought that Chu Xiaoyang would come to her room in the middle of the night just for this. This was simply too strange. Although she couldn't see his expression from the tone of his voice, Qin Ning could tell that he was telling the truth. She tilted her head and thought about it. Very good, since he asked it so bluntly, she wouldn't hide it. There is an old saying that bad marriages are 1,000 years old. You and Qin Baiyun are in love with each other, so how could I be stuck in the middle? I might as well help you two become a pair. Even if I, Qin Ning, am a stinky bun, I still hope that someone will treat me as a treasure in their hands. You don't like me and I don't like you, so we can separate. Bridges go to bridges and roads go to roads. After we separate, we will have nothing to do with each other. She said this without any hesitation and was very straightforward. When Chu Xiaoyang heard this, he felt his chest become heavy and uncomfortable. He said in a bitter voice, You don't have any feelings for this king at all? In the past, it was you who wholeheartedly wanted to marry this king. In the past, it was you who begged your father to let the emperor marry you. In the past, it was you. Without waiting for him to finish, Qin Ning gave a cold laugh and cut him off. In the past. The Qin Ning who was infatuated with you is already dead. She was killed by you and Qin Baiyun. She was clearly speaking the truth, but in Chu Xiaoyang's ears, it was filled with resentment. He was silent. There was a sentence that lingered in his heart, but he could not say it. Fie. He struggled to control his pride and spat out a few words with difficulty. He stared at her behind the curtain and there was a fire burning in his heart. You regret it? Although he did not say it, Qin Ning could guess what he was going to say next. From how he jumped into the lake to save her today, she had already vaguely guessed something. She wasn't stupid, but she didn't want to give him the slightest chance. She didn't want to drag it out any longer and have more dreams. Since he had decided to separate, he had to act quickly. What? Chu Xiaoyang, after you separate from me, you can make your beloved woman your legal wife. Isn't this what you always wanted? You hate me and hate me. I won't appear in front of you anymore and you'll have peace and quiet. What you've always wanted, I've returned it to you. What else are you dissatisfied with? This was the first time she had spoken to him in such a calm tone. There was no mockery or sarcasm. But in his ears, it was incomparably heart-wrenching. Because he knew that every word she said was serious. The calmer her tone was, the more it meant that she didn't care. Chin he. Chapter 351. Chen Ning was stunned. What past did she have with him? After transmigrating over, he was just a stranger to her. I'm very sorry, I don't remember. She gave a careless shrug. She was not willing to read about the past between him and the original owner. When the original owner was desperately in love with him and was suffering for him, he was affectionate with the original owner's little sister and even made Qin Baiyun pregnant before marriage. This kind of trash Chen Ning did not care about it at all. When she had transmigrated over, she had sworn to take revenge for the original owner. But after interacting with him for a while, she found that Chu Xiaoyang was not as bad as she thought. He just did not love Chen Ning, he just loved Qin Baiyun too much. In this world, there was no such thing as having to love someone just because they loved someone. Seeing that he had sacrificed himself to save her twice, she decided to give him back what he had always wanted. She would let herself go and give him his freedom. As for Qin Baiyun, she had done many unjust things, so she would reap what she sowed. Her words were like a blow to Chu Xiaoyang's head. He could not suppress the flames of anger in his heart as his chest heaved up and down as he gasped for breath. Don't remember. She actually said that she didn't remember in such a casual manner. She didn't remember, but he did not forget. He remembered everything that happened between them. Chu Xiaoyang, if Chen Ning loved you in the past, that was a matter between you and her, it had nothing to do with me. What I, Chen Ning, want is a unique man in this world. In his heart, there will only be me and he will never have multiple wives and concubines. It's a pity you are not. Chen Ning's voice was calm and indifferent, but it made the veins on his forehead pop out. How could she be so sure of denying him? How did she know that he was not this kind of man? He really wanted to grab her and loudly question her. Chen Ning did not give him a chance to speak as her words flowed out like water. Chu Xiaoyang, if you truly love a woman, you have to respect her and not shame her. Since you love Qin Baiyun and she has your flesh and blood, what you should do is give her the title of legal wife and not keep bothering me. Although I loathe and hate her, I also pity her. Because she loves a man who is not worthy of love and does not know how to love. That man is you, Chu Xiaoyang. She had kept these words in her heart for a long time, but she never had the chance to say them. But since he wanted to ask her tonight, she would clearly tell him. Her words were like a bucket of cold water, instantly extinguishing the flames in Chu Xiaoyang's heart. He tightly clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he said, "This king will not forget, I will not forget a single word." Not only did he leave, he even agreed to divorce her, he of Ning he. This. She gritted her teeth and jumped off the bed to close the window, hatefully latching it. These men always came and went, they only liked to climb through the window, treating the door as a decoration. Chapter 352. There were no walls in this world that didn't have a crack. Very quickly, the news of King Ding Yuan and his Princess Ding Yuan's separation spread like it had wings, quickly spreading through the streets of the capital city. Almost every tea shop and wine shop's guests were talking about this matter. When they talked about it, they were all beaming with joy and spittle flew everywhere. This was a once-in-a-100-year event in the West Chu country. After Chu Xiaoyang learned of this news, his face turned livid and he almost crushed his teeth from gritting them. He didn't dare to go to court now because once he did, those ministers who didn't get along with him would come over to chat with him with a fake smile on their faces, and all they talked about was this matter. Thinking about the prestigious King Ding Yuan, he was actually asked to separate by his princess. This kind of humiliation was no less than being divorced. Chen Ning, it's you, it must be you. Chu Xiaoyang didn't even need to think to know who had spread this news. Other than Chen Ning, there was no one else. Was she in such a hurry to leave him? Did she want to be certain that he would go back on his word? Chu Xiaoyang revealed an angry smile. His eyes fell onto the secret report in front of him and his bottomless eyes flashed with an unfathomable glow. Very good, since everyone was waiting to see him, Chu Xiaoyang, become a joke on the 10th of April, he would not disappoint them. Chu Xiaoyang's guess was not wrong, this matter was done by Chen Ning. Her goal was to borrow the mouths of the citizens to send this matter to the emperor's ears. Otherwise, if she suddenly proposed to separate on the day she entered the palace and the emperor was not prepared at all, It would be strange if he agreed. Young miss, have you really made up your mind to separate from His Highness? After Xiao Ru heard this news, she was not as happy as Chen Ning thought. Rather, she was filled with worry. Of course it's true. Soon we will be able to leave this broken cage and breathe in the fresh air of the outside world. Birds can fly in the sky and fish can jump in the sea. The world is so big, I want to see it. Chen Ning stood in the yard and looked up as she took a deep breath. Her mood was becoming better and better. She turned around and looked at Xia He with a smile on her face. Has there been any news of Chen Baiyun recently? When she heard that I wanted to separate from Chu Xiaoyang, she must be so happy that she couldn't close her mouth, right? Xia He smiled as she shook her head and said, Princess, you don't know, but the concubine Chen is very worried right now. Every day there are at least 8 doctors who come to see her. What happened? Did something happen to the child in her stomach? Chen Ning asked in a curious voice. Chen Baiyun had only fallen into the lake to drink a few mouthfuls of water and had been stung by bees, so it shouldn't have affected her pregnancy. No, her child is fine, it is her face. Xia He giggled and said, I heard that concubine Shen's face was stung by a bee, but it has been a few days and it is getting worse. It is said that she is so ugly that she cannot be seen. All the imperial physicians in the palace have been invited to take a look at her. She has taken a lot of medicine but there is no effect. Her wet nurse, Miss Chen, was so worried that her hair turned white. Every day she would send people to invite the most famous doctor in the capital to take a look at Miss Chen's face. Chen's teeth. Chen is. It hasn't been good for several days? Chen Ning also felt it was strange. Then she thought about what kind of medicine Chen Baiyun had put in the wine that day that mixed with the honey fragrance, attracting a large swarm of bees. Perhaps it was the side effect of that medicine. If it wasn't for him seeing through her trick, the one disfigured right now would not be Chen Baiyun but her. Chapter 353. It's too ugly. Nanny, when will my face get better? If this continues, His Highness will not want me and he will fall in love with that cheap woman Chen Ning. Whenever Chen Baiyun saw her face in the mirror, she wanted to smash all the mirrors in the world. She had smashed at least 80 mirrors in the past few days. But she still wanted to see them after smashing them. Miss Chen picked up the mirrors on the ground and said, Second miss, you don't need to worry. This old servant will ask the most famous doctor in the city to take a look at you. I won't. I've seen so many doctors, but none of them are useful. They will only laugh at me. I don't want to see anyone, I don't want to see anyone. Chen Baiyun screamed out. She covered her face and fell onto the bed, crying in despair. Second miss, His Highness still cares about you. Your face has become like this, but His Highness still comes to apply medicine for you every day, so you should be happy. This means that what His Highness likes is not your face but rather you as a person. Miss Chen's words were really useful. When Chen Baiyun heard this, she immediately stopped crying and raised her teary eyes in surprise and joy. Really? Nanny, is what you're saying true? Does this mean that the person His Highness likes is me? Not that cheap woman? Of course it's true. This old servant has seen it clearly these past few days. His Highness really treats you well, being gentle and considerate. This old servant is really happy for the second miss. Miss Chen gave a heartfelt sigh. Although Chu Xiaoyang gave the order to spank her, but she did not hate Chu Xiaoyang at all. The second miss face had become so ugly that even a nanny like her couldn't bear to see it, but His Highness did not mind at all. He came to visit the second miss every day and even personally applied medicine for the second miss face. A good husband like this, there wouldn't be a second one in this world. Yet second miss, His Highness has come to see you again. This old servant will leave first. Miss Chen turned around and saw Chu Xiaoyang's tall figure standing in front of the door. She did not dare stay and disturb the two of them, so she quickly left. Yun, is your face better today? Chu Xiaoyang did not even look at Miss Chen. His eyes were filled with tenderness for Chen Baiyun. Chen Baiyun's heart beat faster and she did not dare look at his eyes. Your Highness, Yunner's face is becoming uglier and uglier. She lowered her head. Chu Xiaoyang lifted her chin and carefully looked at her face with a focused gaze. This Chen Baiyun's face was no longer just green and purple. Her face was filled with red. Bai Chen's face was also filled with purple. Chen Baiyun's face was no longer just swollen, red and purple. Those red bumps had already turned into small blisters that were constantly leaking yellow liquid. This kind of face was so disgusting that even she couldn't bear to look at it, but Chu Xiaoyang's face did not have a single look of disgust. He carefully covered her face with the ointment before wiping his hands with a handkerchief in satisfaction. Placing the ointment back into his sleeves, he revealed a gentle smile to Qin Baiyun. Yuner, your face will definitely become as beautiful as it was before. Even if your face never gets better, my feelings for you will always be the same. There will not be a single change. Bye. Qin Baiyun was so moved that she almost cried. She forcefully bit her lips. At this moment, even if Chu Xiaoyang wanted her to die for him, she would be willing. Chapter 354. Qin Baiyun was pleasantly surprised, almost not daring to believe her ears. She said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, can Yuner also come?" Yuner is only a concubine, so it should be elder sister accompanying your Highness. Chu Xiaoyang looked at her and said, "Of course she will go, but this king hopes that the woman accompanying this king will be you." Qin Baiyun's heart was 120 willing, but when she thought of her face she hesitated. "Your Highness, Yuner's face has become like this, it really can't be seen. Yuner is afraid that if others see it they will laugh at your Highness." "No matter what others say, this king doesn't care." Chu Xiaoyang said with a serious expression. "I believe you've heard that this king will be separating from that cheap woman tomorrow. After we separate, this king will ask the emperor to make you this king's legal princess. At that time, this king will personally place the crown of a princess on your head. Yuner, are you willing?" "Of course I'm willing." Qin Baiyun blurted out. She was so excited that she almost fainted. She never thought that such a good thing would suddenly fall into her lap. "Very good, this king has already prepared a set of clothes and jewelry for you. You can wear this to the palace tomorrow." Chu Xiaoyang clapped his hands and Xiaowenzi came in with a tray in his hands. There was a set of beautiful clothes on the tray that Qin Baiyun couldn't take her eyes off. "Your Highness, you're truly thoughtful for Yun." She lovingly stroked the embroidery on the clothes. "It's good that you like it. Have a good rest, this king will personally come pick you up tomorrow and we'll go to the palace banquet together." Chu Xiaoyang revealed a smile and gently looked at her before leaving with Xiaowenzi. On the 10th day of the 4th month, Qin Ning woke up early to bathe and dress up. Today was a big day. Because this was her first time entering the legendary palace and she was going to ask the emperor she had never met for a divorce, so she couldn't be careless. The three maids surrounded her, helping her dress up. As the Ding Yuan princess, the dress she was wearing was custom made. It was a large red embroidered robe, looking elegant and dignified. That bright red color made her skin look as white as snow. Although Xiaoru was a straightforward person, she had a pair of clever hands. She helped her comb her hair into a bun, revealing her smooth forehead. In the middle of the dark cloud-like bun was a 5-phoenix pearl hairpin. Qin Ning slowly stood up, her jewelry jingling. She looked at the young girl in the mirror with her beautiful eyes and sweet smile, almost not recognizing herself. She had always been barefaced, but now that she had put on some makeup, she was so dazzling that no one dared to look at her directly. The three maids were all staring in a daze. "Young miss, if His Highness saw your current appearance, he would be filled with regret." Xiaoru tightly clenched her fists as her eyes filled with excitement. "Young miss, if you let His Highness see you like this, his intestines will turn green." "Really? Then after the divorce I'll let him see this princess' true appearance. This princess also wants to see what kind of face he will have at that time." Qin Ning revealed a faint smile. Her eyes were filled with charm as she looked at Xiaoru. "First bring out the veil, otherwise that bastard Highness will suddenly change his mind and regret it." "Yes, young miss." Xiaoru obediently brought out the veil. Although she was not willing to let Qin Ning cover up her beautiful face, thinking that the young miss would soon be separated from His Highness, that bastard Highness would have a wonderful expression when he saw the young miss face. "Princess, His Highness has sent someone to say that the carriage has been prepared and is waiting at the palace gates. His Highness and concubine Qin have both arrived." Chun Tao came in to report. "Very good, you can wait here for my good news." Chapter 355. There were 2 carriages parked in front of the king's palace. Qin Baiyun entered one of the carriages and the other one was prepared for Qin Ning. Chu Xiaoyang was riding on the jade flower horse with an impatient look on his face. His eyes were glued to the open door, waiting for the late Qin Ning. He was wearing a dark purple formal court robe with a white jade belt around his waist. It made him look even more handsome and elegant. His posture on the back of the horse was even more vigorous and tall. Qin Baiyun lifted the curtain and looked at him without blinking. Her eyes were filled with love. When she thought about how soon she would no longer be a concubine, but rather she would be the King Dingyuan's princess. Her heart began to beat fast with excitement. Suddenly, the smile on her face froze on her lips. In the king's palace's open doors, there was a red-clothed figure walking over. Her large red dress fluttered in the wind like a dancing red butterfly, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Chen Baiyun's eyes filled with hatred as her fingernails dug deep into her palms. Chu Xiaoyang's eyes were glued to the red-clothed girl. Although she was wearing a veil, the way she walked over was like a fairy concubine. People couldn't help wondering what kind of beauty she would have if she took off her veil. "Why are you so late? This king and Yuner have been waiting for you for a long time. Quickly get on the carriage." The tone he used to speak to her was just as bad as before. Ning was already used to his tone. If it was the same tone he used to tease her that night, she really wouldn't have been able to accept it. She was not angry. Her sparkling eyes looked over Chen Baiyun's carriage and then she boarded it with a smile. Chen Baiyun let out a long sigh of relief. Although she did not understand why Ning was always wearing a veil that covered her beautiful face, it was just what she wanted. She was most worried about Chu Xiaoyang seeing Ning's face. But it was a good thing that after today, His Highness would never see that cheap woman again. From now on, she would be with His Highness and no one would disturb her. Because Ning was a bit late, when they arrived at the royal palace, all the invited ministers and nobles were already there. The carriage stopped outside the Long Peace Gate. Once they entered the Long Peace Gate, they would enter the royal palace. Horses and carriages were not allowed. Outside the Long Peace Gate, there was a long line of carriages and horses. It was clear that there were quite a few people here. Chu Xiaoyang dismounted and walked in front of Chen Baiyun's carriage. He considerately helped her get off the carriage, not even looking at Ning from the corner of his eyes. It was a good that Ning did not want him to help her up. She jumped off the carriage with the corner of her dress. Chen Baiyun's heart was filled with sweetness and pride. She deliberately said, "Your Highness, elder sister is the princess. You should walk with elder sister." Chu gave a cold snort but he did not say anything. Ning giggled as she waved her hand and said, "No need, no need. You two are a match made in heaven. Walking together is a perfect match. This idle person won't be an eyesore anymore." She was the first to enter Chongning Gate. Inside the gate, there was a sedan chair specially prepared by the palace for the families of these ministers. She crawled into a warm sedan chair. Four eunuchs lifted the sedan chair and moved it forward unsteadily. Chapter 356. Along the way, Ning lifted the curtains on both sides and looked around the palace in a curious manner. She saw that there were many buildings, one layer after another. It looked magnificent and beautiful, but in her eyes, it was a very beautiful and complicated golden cage. She really didn't know what it felt like to live in this kind of cage. She suddenly felt a bit of sympathy for the emperor that she had never seen before. The sedan stopped in front of the arched door of the royal garden. Ning came out of the sedan and saw a large garden in front of her. It was several acres in size and she couldn't see the end of it. The garden was filled with strange flowers. With the spring breeze, the buds were blooming, the clothes were fragrant, and the flowers reflected off each other. It was very lively. What made Ning feel a bit strange was that most of the ministers that came to the banquet had brought their wives and daughters with them. She swept her eyes over them and saw several young girls. They were all slender and elegant and each of them had been carefully dressed up. Their clothes were luxurious, but their expressions were filled with nervousness and nervousness. "Yeah. There's a girl wearing red clothes over there. She's so beautiful." "That's right, the hairpin on her head is so beautiful. Her dress is even more beautiful. I've never seen such a beautiful dress before." "Who is she?" The young girls that were scattered in the garden saw Ning at the entrance and instantly let out a burst of praise. The surrounding young masters also looked over at Ning with passionate gazes. Although Ning was wearing a veil and they couldn't see her face, the more she was half hidden, the more people would think about her. The young men's eyes lit up and their hearts began to stir. In the blink of an eye, Ning was surrounded by a group of bold young men. "Miss, may I ask which family's young miss are you from? Please allow this young master to recommend himself. This young master is the young master of the Xia family. I'm 19 this year and I haven't taken a wife yet." "Go go go. You haven't taken a wife, but you've taken 2 concubines. Miss, this one is the son of the Minister of Revenue and I've fallen in love with you at first sight." The young men chattered. What kind of rhythm was this? Was this a blind date? Ning's eyes opened wide. Looking at the young and passionate faces, she was speechless for a while. "You bastards, daring to take liberties with this king's princess. All of you scram for this king. The dark purple-robed Chu Xiaoyang separated the crowd and forcefully grabbed Chen Ning's wrist. His eyes were like flames as he angrily glared at the young men. His face was as cold as ice, enough to freeze a person into ice. The youths all gave a cold shiver. Looking at Chu Xiaoyang, who seemed like he wanted to kill someone, they all scattered in embarrassment. Chen Ning, stay with this king. You's not allowed. Chu Xiaoyang's voice was filled with anger. Chen Ning struggled a bit, but he tightened his grip. Your Highness, you're pulling me in front of her. Aren't you afraid of hurting your woman's heart? Chen Ning slightly knit her brows, revealing an unhappy expression. Chen's anger, Ning's words, she said. Ning. Chu King, Ning's Chen's of the others the other day. King angry Wang like person's love like Ning's like buys not Chen's come at peopled. Ning's right at Chen's heart. Of the other hand. He to the Chu to him to Ning of Chen of. Chen Ning saw that he couldn't be reasoned with, so she just let him pull her forward. After all, it wouldn't be long before he wouldn't have the qualifications to control her anymore. Chapter 357. There was a cool palace in the center of the imperial garden. There were no doors or windows and it was completely open, allowing one to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the garden. The palace banquet was arranged in this cool palace and there were already tables and chairs set up. There were eunuchs leading the ministers to their seats according to their rank. There was an imperial chair in the north facing south with a golden embroidered blanket on it. It could be seen with a single glance that it was the emperor's dragon chair, but there was no one on it. The emperor had not arrived yet. Chu Xiaoyang was King Ding Yuan, so his seat was next to eldest princess and Li's table. Before they even sat down, Chen Ning saw eldest princess and Li holding Yi Tingxian's hand as they walked into the main hall. The two of them were wearing bright clothes just like a pair of immortals. They immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. Many officials surrounded them, greeting them and flattering them. The eldest princess did not care about a single one of them. Her eyes swept across the main hall like she was looking for someone. Chen Ning revealed a faint smile, knowing that she was looking for her. She wanted to let go of Chu Kaiyang's hand and go forward, but he held onto her tightly. Chu Xiaoyang, let go of me. The eldest princess is looking for me. What? Are you so impatient to separate from this prince? Do you think that the eldest princess will help you pave the road and the emperor will agree? Chu Xiaoyang gave a cold laugh. Although he clearly knew that she was here to divorce, but seeing her excited look, it still made his heart feel suffocated. Chu Xiaoyang, things have come to this point. Are you going back on your word? Chen Ning looked back. What if this king says yes? Chu Xiaoyang said without changing his expression. Chen Ning couldn't help being stunned. She suspiciously looked at Chu Xiaoyang, wanting to see if his words were true or false. Chu Xiaoyang's expression did not change. His eyes were like a bottomless lake as he stared right at her. Behind him, Qin Baiyun's face turned pale, but her face was also covered by a veil like Chen Ning, so it could not be seen. Not to mention that Chu Xiaoyang's eyes did not look at her at all. Your highness joke, it's not funny at all. Chen Ning changed the topic and turned her head, avoiding his aggressive gaze. That gaze looked like it wanted to eat a person. Ning. The eldest princess finally noticed Chen Ning and waved at her from afar. Chen Ning took this chance to escape. She let go of Chu Xiaoyang's hand and smiled as she walked over to the eldest princess, bowing down. There's no need to be so polite with this princess, quickly stand up. The eldest princess grabbed Chen Ning's hand. That intimacy made everyone's jaws drop. She pulled Chen Ning 2 steps away and looked over her. Her eyes were filled with shock, but when she saw the veil on her face she asked in a puzzled voice, "Why are you wearing this thing on your face?" Chen Ning revealed a faint smile. Instead of answering she asked, "Eldest princess, when can Ning see the emperor?" "This princess is indeed bringing you to see the emperor. However Ning, this princess will ask you one more time. Have you really thought this through?" Ning's heart. The eldest princess looked over at Chu Xiaoyang and wanted to say a few good words for him, but she saw Chen Baiyun standing beside Chu Xiaoyang. Her face sunk and she angrily said, "That brat even brought a concubine into the palace, he really isn't a good thing. Come, this princess will take you to see the ruler." She did not hesitate and held Chen Ning's hand. They left the cool palace and headed south. Chapter 358. King Ding Yuan, after last time's hunt, have your injuries healed? Chu Xiaoyang's face turned livid as he stopped walking. He angrily stared at Yi Tingxian. Husband Yi, has this king offended you? Why do you and royal aunt keep going against this king? Yi Tingxian said with a smile. King Ding Yuan, the eldest princess has something to say to your princess. It's best if us men don't go. How about we drink a few cups together? He pulled Chu Xiaoyang's hand and did not even look at Chen Baiyun beside him as he walked towards the banquet. Chu Xiaoyang gave a snort and looked in the direction Chen Ning left in. Finally he looked away and sat down to drink with Yi Tingxian. Of course he knew what she was doing. Seeing the emperor and wanting to separate? But no matter what she wanted to do, the one who would win in the end would be him. Chen Baiyun stood alone in the main hall, with no one coming forward to greet her. When the wives of the officials saw her, if they didn't point at her, they would ridicule her. They all knew her identity. She was a concubine in name, but she was actually a concubine. The ones these main wives looked down on the most were concubines. Chen Baiyun's face turned green and red. Hearing everyone's criticism of her, she was filled with shame, wishing she could find a hole to hide in. Her intestines turned green with regret. She really shouldn't have come to this kind of place. It was truly shameful. But thinking about it, before long, she would go from being a concubine that everyone looked down on to becoming the Ding Yuan princess that everyone envied. She suddenly looked up and gave a cold snort to the crowd. Very soon, you will all be trying to please this princess in front of me, Chen Baiyun. Ning in front of us is the royal study. My royal brother is inside, you can go in alone. The eldest princess held Chen Ning's hand as they passed through the layers of palaces. They walked her all the way to the door of the royal study before stopping. Chen Ning bit her lips. She was normally calm, but thinking about how she was about to face an emperor that she had never met and had the power to decide her life and death, her heart was a bit uneasy. It was said that being with a ruler was like being with a tiger. What if? You don't need to worry, my royal brother is wise and decisive. As long as you have a reason, my royal brother will not refuse your request. The eldest princess smiled as she patted the back of her hand. I'll be going back first. I hope I can hear good news from you in a bit. Many thanks for the eldest princess care for Ning. Chen Ning was filled with gratitude towards the eldest princess. Yipsai. The eldest princess once again revealed a look of pity. She shook her head and turned to leave. The corridors on both sides of the imperial study were filled with guards armed with swords. Layers upon layers of security, the emperor's might was solemn. Chen Ning slowly walked in front of the royal study and said in a clear voice, Ding Yuan Princess Chen requests an audience with the emperor. Come in. A clear and melodious voice came from the room. This voice seemed very familiar. Chen Ning did not have time to think about it. She pushed open the door to the royal study and slowly walked in. As soon as she entered the room, the two doors closed behind her, causing her to be slightly taken aback. Right now, she was like an arrow on a bowstring. She had no choice but to release it. She lowered her head and swept her gaze around. She had already seen a pair of bright yellow court boots embroidered with a five-clawed golden dragon. There was no need to ask, this person was without a doubt the emperor. Ding Yuan's Princess Chen greets the emperor. Chen Ning knelt down according to the customs of this era while complaining in her heart. The emperor did not say a word. He did not even give an sound and did not tell her to rise. She knelt on the ground for a while and her knees were aching, but she still did not hear the emperor's voice. What was this? Chapter 359. Ding Yuan Princess Chen greets the emperor. Chen Ning said in a deep voice. She slowly said it again. Her words were clear and powerful. She did not believe that the emperor would continue to pretend to be deaf and mute. I said that we would meet again very soon. Isn't it true that we do? Suddenly, a playful voice came from above her head. That familiar voice and tone made her body tremble. Xiaohei, why is it you? She suddenly looked up and found a very familiar face in front of her. That elegant face that was like the distant mountains and the deep black eyes. If it wasn't Mo Chuan, who else could it be? In an instant, her eyes opened wide in shock and her face was filled with amazement. He always liked to wear black clothes, but now he was wearing a bright yellow dragon robe. It made her eyes light up, but at the same time she felt confused and unfamiliar. The emperor in front of her, was he really a Mo Chuan? That cold and arrogant black-clothed assassin had suddenly transformed into the supreme ruler of the 9-5 realms. Just by changing his clothes, he had turned from a cold and arrogant person to a noble and dignified person, as if the might of the heavens could not be offended. You. What are you doing? Chen Ning still could not determine if the young emperor in front of her was Mo Chuan or not. The emperor suddenly reached out and picked her up while she was still kneeling on the ground in a daze. Then he walked over to the couch on the side. Her heart suddenly began to beat faster and faster. He was Emo Chuan. He still had that familiar clear aura on him. That's right, he was Emo Chuan. Chen Ning's nervousness and unease all disappeared and was replaced with a wave of anger. He was the high and mighty emperor with an unattainable status, but he had lied to her that he was an assassin that roamed the world. He didn't even look at her when he lied, lying to her for this long. She actually believed his words and foolishly allowed him to keep her in the dark. He must be secretly laughing at her for being a fool, right? This really was ironic. She had always thought that she could read minds, but she had been tricked by him like a fool. Does your knees hurt from kneeling? I just wanted to tease you, you won't be angry with me, right? Emo Chuan gently placed her on the couch and sat beside her, looking at her with a pair of deep eyes. There were no outsiders in the room and his voice was the same as before. Other than that dragon robe. Chen Ning suddenly felt that the bright yellow was very dazzling. You will beg to see me. Emo Chuan clearly did not say anything, but the last words he said before he left suddenly rang in her ears. That's right, he had already predicted that she would beg him. That was why he left without any fear and even left behind such a sentence with such certainty. Now, wasn't he like a beggar, kneeling in front of him and begging? The anger in her heart surged up wave after wave, and her chest was about to melt. She couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes had become calm and without the shock and excitement she had when they first met were no longer there. Emperor, this is your dragon bed. This minister's concubine is lying here. I'm afraid it's inappropriate, she said in a strange and indifferent voice. She wanted to sit up, but he pressed down on her shoulder. Emo Chuan stared right into her eyes, like he wanted to see into her heart. She lowered her eyes, refusing to meet his gaze. If he didn't let her move, then she wouldn't move. Chapter 360. Do you really have to use this kind of tone to talk to me? Emo Chuan looked at her cold expression of rejection and his heart filled with pain. Only the heavens knew how he had spent the past few days. Almost all the time he was thinking about the scene of him reuniting with her today. He had thought of many possibilities. He thought that she would be pleasantly surprised and happy, but he never thought that she would be this cold that rejected him. Does the emperor feel that this minister's concubine's tone is not respectful enough? I'm very sorry, this minister's concubine's words have always been like this. If you don't like it, then send someone to cut off this minister's concubine's head. Chen Ning curled her lips in a mocking manner, but she still did not look at him. That's right, the emperor does not need to send this minister's concubine to cut off my head. With the emperor's good martial arts, you can take whoever's head you want. Emo Chuan fiercely gritted his teeth. His passion had been frozen into ice by her cold attitude. This girl, she kept calling him this minister's concubine. Was she preparing to anger him to death? In front of me, you don't need to use the words minister's concubine. He found it jarring. Those two words were constantly reminding him of her identity. She was the Dingyuan princess and also his royal nephew's woman. She was a taboo that he could not touch or touch. Then what does the emperor want to hear me call myself? Chen Ning curled her lips and finally looked up to look at him. Her eyes were sparkling and watery, causing the frozen lake in his heart to turn into a pool of spring water that rippled. He knew that as long as he saw her eyes, he could only throw away his armor. He would never be able to be angry with her. No matter who I am or what my identity is, the words I say will always count. He suddenly had an impulse and opened his arms to hug her. He was tightly hugging her, so tightly that she could not break free at all. His smooth chin rubbed against her ear. His voice was low and deep, but each word was clear and powerful, coming from the bottom of his heart. Fuck the rules. Fuck the taboo. He just wanted to hug her. Chen Ning closed her eyes. This was a familiar embrace. When he was still an assassin, he had also forcefully hugged her. At that time, he had given her a kind of sweet expectation. But now she felt that it was really laughable. 24 years old, not married, not engaged. His words once again echoed in her ears. He even shamelessly asked her to be his matchmaker. What was his identity? The unreachable emperor above tens of thousands of people. He was the ruler of the 9-5. He had countless women in the palace. Just how bored was he to pretend to be an assassin and follow her around? Teasing her, watching her fall in love with him bit by bit, was this how he picked up girls as an emperor? The chin of his tricks. Chen Ning had actually been tricked by him. Your Majesty, you're hugging me so tightly that I can't breathe. Can you let go of me first and let me catch my breath before hugging me again, alright? She suddenly opened her eyes, and her voice carried the coquettishness and gentleness of a young girl. Her eyes to chin to of her to of her of to him. This girl she was to say this. Hearing her soft tone, how could he bear to let go of her? Okay. No matter how reluctant he was, he couldn't refuse her soft request. He slowly loosened his arms, but he still couldn't bear to look away from her face. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.